If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 134, ch 130, Monster, Together, Strong. After Elsa is finished, what happened next is up to your imagination. In other words, Tigress and Rapunzel weren't spared that night just because they came while playing with themselves. That night, Jin showed them the true no mercy rule that he implemented to them. As for the person outside their room, Jin has long known about Mavis trying to peep into their room, but with his knowledge and chi that he got from Master Oogway, no one other than himself can open the door. Morning came and it was a brand new day. Due to yesterday's events, Mavis's birthday party never came. However, that's fine to Mavis, who has been celebrating her birthday for 117 years. She's going to be lying if she said that she didn't get bored from all those parties, which is why she felt like this is a change in her life. However, Dracula and the monsters weren't able to get their beauty sleep as the image of humans kept invading their minds, instilling horror upon them. Thankfully, Jin's yesterday's speech helped them get through this predicament, albeit only a little bit, but that's enough. As soon as they saw the sunlight outside their windows, this quickly came to come out of their rooms and discuss yesterday's events. No matter how effective Jin's speech is, their strong fear towards humans mixed with Dracula's year of brainwashing them that humans should be feared is still buried within their veins. Which is why, the moment they got out of their rooms all at the same time, Dracula and the monsters all quickly met up in the hotel hallways. Drac! Frankenstein called out to him with obvious eye bags under his eyes. Let me guess, you didn't get enough sleep. Dracula answered with the same obvious eye bags under his eyes. Not just enough sleep, I didn't get any sleep at all. Frankenstein clutched his hair and said while his eyes are darting around like an addict. All right, calm down, Frank. Everything will be solved. We just need time. Dracula calms him down while at the same time, he also looks at the other monsters. Their states aren't as bad as Frankenstein, but that doesn't mean they're fine. Dracula could also see that the matter of humans invading his hotel is a huge thing for them. What are we gonna do, Drac? Where's your party planner? Wayne asked with a shrug of his shoulders. For the last time, Wayne. He's not a party planner. I was just joking yesterday. Oh really? I've been curious, if he's not your party planner, then who is he? Surely, he's not just any normal monster, is he? Eunice, Frankenstein's wife, crossed her arms under her non-existent bosom and asked in suspicion. He's a... Dracula slowly backed away while trying to think of lies that he could tell them. There's no need to hide it anymore, Drac. Tell them who I am. Or I used to be. Suddenly appearing behind him, Jin patted Dracula's shoulders and gave him the go sign. The moment Dracula heard his voice, his panicked expression turned into a wide grin as his chest welled up in pride. The monsters, who saw Jin appear behind Dracula, were surprised to see him arrive exactly at the time where they were doubting his true identity. Why does it feel like Jin has his eyes all around the castle? To be honest, they're not entirely wrong. His chi sensing combined with his psychokinesis, where he could peek at everyone's minds, he could indeed watch over the entire castle without anyone knowing it. Ladies and gentlemen. Dracula confidently stepped forward and loudly announced. Once everyone's attention was back to him, Dracula continued his words. The person behind me is the myth, the legends, and last but not the least, he's... Dracula stopped and looked at everyone's reactions. He wanted to make it as intense as possible. The Lucifer. Dracula finished with a smirk in his face. Everyone hitched their breaths as Dracula finished his announcement, and after a few seconds, someone among them finally spoke up. Who is Lucifer? I think I heard about this Lucifer, isn't he just a myth? Yeah, I think I heard about him in bedtime stories. Contrary to Dracula's expectations, the monster's reactions weren't as exaggerated as he expected it to be. Whoa, what's with the reactions? Aren't you guys supposed to be I don't know, shocked? Surprised? Hearing Dracula's words, the monsters all looked at one another before looking back at Dracula and shrugging their shoulders in unison. To be honest, I expected more of this. I thought he would be the legendary Slender Man that I kept on hearing about. Yeah, me too. Lucifer is already famous enough and almost everyone claims to be him. Murray, the mummy, shrugged his shoulders and replied to Dracula. Guys, he's not a fake. He's the real deal. Dracula was irritated that the monsters thought that Jin was one of those cheap imitates that wants to take all of his glory. Oh really? I heard Lucifer can shoot lasers in his eyes. Eunice crossed her arms and said, her face says it all that she would only believe that Jin is the Lucifer if he shoots lasers in his eye. Of course he can do it, right J. Dracula didn't manage to finish his sentence when the entire table on their side was sliced in half. Zib. How was it sliced in half? Red lasers that came out of Jin's eyes. Since Jin has maintained his devil form the moment he stepped in this world, he doesn't need to transform just to show off his lasers to them. I think he's the real deal. Griffin's body was frozen as he spoke. Blue Ung Blob nodded his head, while making a weird noise that only some of them can understand. Alright, he's the Lucifer. Wayne pointed both his index fingers at Jin and made a clicking sound with his mouth. Yeah, he's the Lucifer. Oh my burning toes. He's the Lucifer. Frankenstein was about to answer in a monotone voice when his brain successfully processed that he was in front of the legendary Lucifer himself. The Lucifer. He's real. Where's my story time book about him? I need it to be signed. Like a chain reaction, everyone started running around in circles and surrounded Jin while asking several questions that made Jin question his life. Are you really the Lucifer? Can you shoot lasers aside from your eyes? Like your ass cheeks? I heard you eat humans when you're bored, is it true? Humans? I heard he also eats monsters. What's with these guys? Jin's mouth twitched several times each time he heard weird questions coming from them. Since when did they come up with the thought that he eats both humans and monsters? He's a devil for God's sake, not a cannibal. Alright, everyone shut it. After feeling his ears being drowned by their noises, Jin's irritation grew until he couldn't take it anymore. So the moment Jin shouts, the entire area was silent. The previously noisy monsters who have several weird questions in their heads were now gone and were replaced with silence, something that Jin surprisingly liked for now. Can you blame him though? If Jin is going to choose between silence and noise, he's gonna choose silence, no questions asked. He doesn't care if pure silence could make a person go crazy. He's already crazy. After a few seconds of silence, Jin finally took his turn to start speaking. I know everyone is afraid, scared, and many other emotions are going through you all, but let me tell you, these emotions won't provide you any help at the moment, perhaps only relief. After seeing that he got everyone's attention, Jin continued. But that doesn't mean we'll let emotions rule our decisions, trust me, it's not a good thing. What we need right now is to stay strong, together. Monsters, together, strong. Jin made a gesture like a certain ape. Repeat after me. Monsters, together, strong. After seeing their confused expressions, Jin repeated, and this time, he wanted them to follow and repeat after him. Monsters, together, strong. Unlike the others who stayed quiet, it was Frankenstein who surprisingly repeated after him. Good. Again. Monsters, together, strong. This time, it wasn't just Frankenstein who repeated, Dracula, who has been quiet by his side, also followed suit. And like a chain reaction, one by one, the other monsters also followed and repeated the word while at the same time, raising both of their fists together just like the gesture that Jin showed them earlier. Monsters, together, strong. Among the crowd, Mavis looked at the yelling crowd in amazement. She was surprised to see Jin's speech skills and aura of leadership. It's like he's starting a brand new era. Mavis then turned her eyes to Jin and watched his face with an unknown expression on her face, like a maiden looking at her savior. Monsters, together, strong. Monsters, together, strong. Monsters, together, strong. This time, Jin also joined them and yelled the chant along with them, not knowing that this move has just changed the entire course of the universe, further angering a certain god. Meanwhile, Thomas, oblivious to the events that just changed in the world of monsters, was having a meeting with a certain someone. Someone that hates Dracula and the entirety of the monsters themselves. Why did you call me, Mr. President? Surely, we don't know each other, right? Looking at the man that looks like he's about to die any moment now, Thomas grinned and called out the name of the person he personally met up with. It is nice to meet you too, Abraham Van Helsing. I have a sweet deal for you. Chapter 135, ch 131, Preparing. Who do you think is the strongest monster, Abraham? Grabbing a chair to sit on, Thomas sat on it and asked a simple question. Strongest monster? What kind of a question is that? Abraham looked at Thomas with doubt in his eyes, as if he was looking at a crazy person. Just answer it. Fine. Who else but Dracula? Abraham shrugged his shoulders and answered based on his current knowledge. However, he wasn't expecting Thomas's answer. Wrong. What? Are there any more monsters that are stronger than Dracula? Abraham leaned forward and asked with doubt and hesitation in his voice. Tell me, Abraham. Have you heard of the Kraken? Kraken? The biggest monster in the sea? Are you telling me the strongest monster is the Kraken? Oh please, the Kraken isn't even real. The same goes to Dracula and the monsters, isn't it? People think that they aren't real and just myths, but guess what? They're real, so what stops the other monsters like the Kraken from also being real? You're into something. Get to the point, Mr. President. Abraham squints his eyes at Thomas and curtly says. Call me Thomas. What I'm about to tell you will give you the ability to kill Dracula, kill the entire monster population. After cheering the entire monsters, it's finally time to prepare for war. Knowing the humans, their previous visit definitely won't be their last. Jin knows them, and once they set their eyes upon something, they're ready to sacrifice even their own kin just to get what they want. That's how cruel humans are. They're no different than the monsters. Martha, take Mavis and leave the hotel. Fly as far away as possible. Dracula grabbed both his wife and daughter before bringing them to their room. Drac, this is not what we talked about. Let me help you. Martha, Dracula's wife, grabbed the hem of his cape and resolutely said. I err. Hearing Martha's words, Dracula doesn't know what to say. I think Mom is right, Dad. You don't have to do this alone. Mavis stepped forward and said, making Dracula much more speechless than usual. Drac. Seeing the worried look that appeared on Dracula's face, Martha got worried and immediately knew what causes Dracula to be worried, and it made her heart warm just by thinking about it. I can't forgive myself if something bad happened to both of you. Dracula's shoulders were slumped and he finally released his pent-up worries. We'll be fine, Dad. We're stronger than you think. Mavis smiled and felt happy that her dad is still the same dad that she knew despite being faced with many hurdles. A few steps away from them, Jin watched them and felt touched by their sweet interaction. They're so sweet, aren't they? Rapunzel came near him and said while looking at the Dracula family with a warm look on her face. Hey, do you think we'll also be like them in case we have a child? Rapunzel's abrupt question caught him off guard. What? Children? Isn't it too early? Perhaps, I should finish my mission first before we should think about that. Jin wiped off the sweat in his forehead and replied. Well, it's just food for thought. I wasn't thinking properly, haha. Rapunzel cutely tucked her hair behind her ears and said while looking away. It feels like he just dodged a bullet there. It's not like Jin doesn't want responsibility, it's just that he has a mission and he can't have children now. If he did, then something bad might happen to his family. He wanted everything to be at peace first before bringing his children to this world. It's not like I don't want children, okay? Let's just wait for the right time. As of now, our lives aren't peaceful enough for our children to live in peace yet. Noticing the sad expression on Rapunzel's face, Jin felt a pang in his heart and quickly comforted her. I see. You're right. I was too hasty, hee. After a moment of thinking, Rapunzel finally realized how heavy what she just said to Jin and quickly scratched her head and apologized. It's fine. I understand. As for now, we should probably focus on the threat of humans. To be honest, I came here a bit confident in this world, but after the humans invaded, my confidence was slowly dwindling. Jin said while looking around and seeing the monsters talking to one another, some are nervous while some are confident thanks to his previous speech. So, what's the plan? Tigress stepped forward and said, her fists were clenching, showing how much of a battle maniac she is. Either we defend or we attack. Since the humans have known where the hotel is, then it is inevitable to be attacked by them. Jin placed his finger under his chin and said, multiple strategies were forming in his mind. So, the plan is. As someone who rarely uses her brains and is more of a brawn, Tigress can't perceive what Jin is trying to express. In layman's terms, we will be defending for now. We'll wait until they start their attack on us. Jin remarked. How are you so sure they would attack us, by the way? This time it was Elsa's turn to ask. I just know. Jin answered with a confident smirk on his face. Of course he knows that humans will attack. He has watched enough movies to know that they would attack anything they couldn't control. Alright then. Although Elsa was curious and wanted to know the answer, what could she do? After everyone settled in and accepted the fact that the humans have found them and are targeting them, they all finally turned their attention back to Jin. They were thankful that Jin at least gave them some time to adjust and adapt to their current situation. You all okay now? Good, then let's all proceed with our plan. Jin then smirked. The monsters all nodded and they gathered up around Jin, giving him a spotlight. This will be what we're doing. The humans have attacked us first and I'm not gonna be surprised if they tried to attack us for the second time. Jin first introduced the problem. This is very important once you're assuming the leader of a certain group. Always tell them the current problem first. There's no need to soften your words to not scare them. If they're scared then that only means they're pussies and not a good member for the group. Which is why we'll give them a surprise. The hotel will no longer be a hotel. Hopefully, that's fine with you, Chronicles. Jin then turned his attention to Dracula, amongst the crowd. The monsters then turned their attentions to Dracula, who awkwardly smiled. Oh, of course. I built this place to be the safe haven for monsters, and if being a hotel is not enough to protect them, then naturally it has to be improved, right? Dracula really deserved as the unofficial leader of the monsters before Jin, as he quickly analyzed his current situation and gave the best speech he could give without looking like a fool to their eyes. Oh, that's sweet of you, Drac. However, unlike the other monsters who quickly believed in Dracula and felt touched by his words, Wayne and his friends all rolled their eyes at the same time. As someone who has stayed and interacted with Dracula for a very long time, they already know how shameless Dracula is. Safe haven for all the monsters? More like a safe haven for his wife and daughter. The monsters are just a bonus because a certain monster back then found out about his plan of building a safe haven and thought that Dracula was building a safe haven place for all the monsters, quickly spreading the word throughout the entire monster population. Dracula couldn't even stop the rumor from spreading, and before he knew it, people has already worshipped and admired him for what he is trying to do. Fortunately for Drac, only some of them knew this, as Dracula accidentally told them about this back then when he got drunk from his own birthday. How will we do that then? Back to the current situation, a single monster shouted and asked Jin. That's simple. We all have unique abilities and powers that the humans don't have. Sure, they outnumber us and are smarter than us. But that doesn't mean we don't have our own advantage. You see, I already know what they're capable of. But them? They don't know about our capabilities. They can only rely on their history and myths to know about us, but are those really true about us? From what I know, their knowledge towards us is limited. Jin could already see some of the monsters' eyes shining in enlightenment. Murray, you have the authority over the sand, right? Jin then pointed at the sand mummy and called out to him. What? Oh, the sand? They're my toys. After noticing that everyone's attention was on him, Murray didn't fail his ancestors and shamelessly boasted himself. That's great. We can use your ability to build us a wall and many other things. You there, the dragon with flaming hair. Seeing your appearance, I could guess you can make fire, right? Jin then tried to find another useful monster when he suddenly saw a dragon amongst the crowd, albeit a bit smaller than the actual dragon, but it's still a dragon. If dragons also exist in this world, then does that mean gods such as Odin and Zeus also exist? Chapter 136, ch 132, Vlad Dracula. After thinking that mythological gods might be real in this world, Jin decided to put this thought in the back of his head and focus on more important things other than this. Alright, boys, let's proceed with the plan. Jin smiled and announced loudly. It's been a week and we haven't received any more reports from Rambo 6-16, something is wrong. Back to the human side, Thomas has been tapping his fingers on the table for a few minutes. It's been a week since everyone in the White House, including him, is waiting for their further reports. However, despite waiting for a week and even sending back a message to them, they haven't received any replies. It's like they disappeared out of thin air. Something is wrong. Thomas muttered to himself. Sure, he could ignore the fact that Jonathan, which is Mavis's love interest in the movie, isn't in the hotel. However, something inside him tells him that there's something wrong in the monster world. Could there also be a reincarnator like me? Damn it, hopefully, it's not someone like me who has gifts. Thomas was so nervous that he started biting his fingernails. Fuck it. Not wanting to take any chances of something bad happening, Thomas decided to make his move first. Just like in chess, the first move is always the one who has the higher chances of winning. This is Thomas's belief even though he never played chess in his life. So, he grabbed the telephone on his table and placed it in his ears. Send Army General Jace to my office, now. It's been a whole week since the last time Jin made his speech. Due to him, the monsters were once again back to their previous self. In other words, their true monster selves. Murray has been a great help in creating traps and hiding them, while Wayne was useful for tracking where the chopper came from and where they entered. His mission isn't actually that hard as he has the help of his nose and several nearby wolves that pointed where they first saw the chopper. It didn't take long before they discovered that the chopper actually went from a very long way, even crossing several islands just to get to them. After Wayne reported back to Jin, he decided to place several aerial traps that would intercept the choppers just in case they use it again to enter their territory. What kind of aerial traps, you might ask? Combined with his knowledge about Qi, he managed to create a simple technique that would send an alarm to him once there is a disturbance in the air, and this alarm would also trigger the trap, which is similar to a flashbang that blinds the entire area where the alarm goes off. It's simple but effective. Imagine the pilot got blinded. Who knows what would happen to the chopper once the pilot is blind? For your information, the place where the trap lies is a very deep jungle. So, the chances of the choppers crashing are very high due to the tall trees. Aside from that, some monsters have also been a great help in building a small but effective wall around the hotel. The walls aren't too close to the hotel, they're more like a perimeter that surrounds the hotel including its surroundings. These perimeter would act not completely for defense but just to prevent ground attacks on the hotel. What was the material used for the walls? Obviously, the resources in the hotel are limited, so they have to improvise, and what else could they use aside from concrete and cement? Murray, the mummy. Thankfully, he could harden his sands, so the walls are not only sturdy but much sturdier than normal concrete. Aside from those, Jin and his women didn't stay idle either. Although the monsters are much stronger than humans, that doesn't mean they could beat their technology. Which is why Jin had to impart his knowledge about humans and their technologies to them so they would know who and what they're fighting. Tigress also imparted some of her knowledge in Kung Fu, although it might not be useful if a gun is pointed at your head, but at least some monsters are immune to normal bullets and would definitely be able to cause devastation to humans once they could learn a thing or two from Tigress. Meanwhile, Rapunzel also noticed that some monsters don't have any limbs either from battle or some unknown reason. Which is why she used her ability to completely heal them and remove their disabilities, so they would be more effective and be able to join in the upcoming battle. As for Elsa? To be honest, at first Jin was thinking of making her build the walls, but ice melts, so it's not as effective as Murray's sturdy sand walls. Jin? Are you there? Softly knocking on the door, Mavis then waited for a response. Come in. Getting a reply from the inside, Mavis twisted the doorknob and entered. However, what she wasn't expecting though was to see Jin with nothing in his top while only wearing simple dark pajamas. What? Suddenly turning red, Mavis failed to notice blood trickling from her nose as her eyes were glued on Jin's body, specifically the godlike sculptured muscles on his upper body. Mavis? What's with you? As Jin just got out of the shower, he hasn't worn anything on his top yet. It's kind of his hobby to not wear anything on top for a few hours whenever he takes a bath. It's something that he accidentally got after bathing with Tigress one time, and she persuaded him to not wear anything on top for a moment as she wanted to feel Jin's heat anytime she wants and needs. Since then, Jin isn't wearing anything on his upper body anymore. Your nose is bleeding. Quickly grabbing the towel that he used after a quick cold shower, Jin used it to wipe off the blood trickling from Mavis's nose. This also serves as some kind of wake-up call to Mavis as she wakes up from her trance after feeling the wet towel on her face. And noticing that Jin was up close to her and wiping her face, Mavis turned more red. I swear, her pupils are swirling like some kind of high school maiden that is in love. Jin scratched his head and decided to wear something on his upper body lest Mavis might pass out and misunderstandings started occurring. It's not like he's some kind of anime harem protagonist where some misunderstandings causes him trouble. Jin proceeded to leave her for a while and grab a shirt from the closet. This gave Mavis enough time to recover from her state of trance and quickly wipe off the excess blood on her face. I think I will never be able to forget that. Mavis whispered to herself before looking at Jin, who has finally worn a shirt. Although she was disappointed that she won't be able to see it again, she remembered her purpose of coming here. Because of Jin's attractive body earlier, she has quite forgotten why she was here in the first place. Jin. Mavis called out to him while unconsciously tapping the tip of her index fingers against each other like a certain ninja. Yes. I just came here to say thank you. If it wasn't for you, I don't know what would have happened to the hotel, the monster, and also Dad. Feeling her sincerity, Jin can't help but pat her head and reply. You don't have to thank me for that. As a fellow monster, there's no way I would let those pesky I won't let anyone trample on us, monsters. Jin awkwardly coughs and corrected himself. It looks like the longer he stays in his devil form, the more his evil thoughts start to intensify and emerge. I probably should take some time off and turn back to my human form. It's been 8 days since I transformed into my devil form. Jin made a note to himself before turning his attention back to Mavis, who was smiling by now. You kinda sound like Gramps. Oh, kill the humans, blah blah blah, ha ha ha. Mavis starts to chuckle and even tries to imitate Vlad in her own style. Though she looked cute doing so. You mean Vlad? Yeah, that sounds like him. Jin also chuckled and remembered his old friend in this world. You know Gramps? Mavis gasped in shock as she didn't expect Jin to actually know about her grandpa, Vlad. I don't just know him, Mavis. He's my first friend in this world. So, he's quite a special person to me. Speaking of Gramps, he always attends my birthday, it's quite weird of him to not attend it a week ago. Mavis placed her finger under her chin as she wondered. Unknown to everyone, Vlad was busy having his own fight. My lord, the humans have infiltrated the monster territory. It seems like their new president is more courageous and a fool unlike the previous one. Kneeling on the ground, a hooded man reported to an old man sitting on a chair, drinking jasmine tea in a teacup. I knew this would happen. Obama didn't tell this new president about the peace treaty that was signed decades ago. Vlad replied in an annoyed tone after finishing a single cup of jasmine tea. Yes, my lord. What should we do? We'll meet this new president and see if we can sign another peace treaty. Vlad stood up straight and even waved his cape like some badass character before eventually curving his back out of oldness. Crack. Ah, my back. Chapter 137, ch 133, Peace Treaty. Thomas was sitting in his office as he tapped his finger on the table repeatedly. A habit that he has formed ever since he took office as the President of the United States of America. It wasn't that hard actually, his brainwashing is enough for him to secure the office. However, that doesn't mean it was easy. He has to meticulously plan everything just in case something goes wrong, and thankfully, this world, or at least the human side, is just the same as his previous world, so it wasn't hard for him to make money fast with his investments. And with his huge amounts of money, he managed to secure several companies and even made his own. Thanks to this he got a few political connections, and from then on, he started his journey towards the top. It's very similar to some reincarnators in fanfics, so he's probably not that different. The only difference is probably he became the President of America. He just finished a meeting with his army general, and after telling him to prepare their army for the upcoming battle. Jin was right, humans would indeed try and invade anything that they couldn't control. The only thing he is wrong about is the person that wanted to invade them isn't a human but a vampire. Smash! You don't smell like a human. Suddenly, someone spoke from behind after hearing his windows crashing sound. Panicking, Thomas quickly turned around and didn't hesitate to lunge himself towards the source of the voice. Hoopsie, now that's something a human couldn't do. Unfortunately for Thomas, Vlad seemed to have an ability to predict the future as he casually dodged his strike. Who is this old man? And where are all my guards? Irritated, Thomas grew more angry and kept launching strikes after strikes towards the intruder. However, no matter how fast he could go, Vlad would either block his strikes or dodge it calmly. Sensing the disadvantage in his situation, Thomas quickly used his telepathic connection towards his vampires and called them out for help. Since it is almost night time, there would be no problem for them to go out now and enter the White House. As for what he is doing in the White House late at night? Of course, he sleeps here. Out of all the previous presidents of America, he's probably the only one who does this. Who are you? What do you want? In order for his backup to arrive, Thomas has to buy time. Though deep inside, he was shocked to see it was Vlad, Dracula's father. Because of their previous fight earlier, or more like a one-sided battle, Thomas didn't register the intruder's face as he deemed him an assassin that was hired to kill him, so he never bothered to look at his face. But now that he looked at him, he was both shocked and confused. Why is Vlad here? Is there some kind of derail in the movie's plot? First, Jonathan suddenly came back to his home as if he wasn't supposed to be at Hotel Transylvania, and now, Vlad Dracula coming to meet him. Thomas, did Barack tell you about the peace treaty between humans and monsters? Vlad finally told his purpose for coming here. Peace treaty? Thomas asked in confusion, while at the same time, he blamed himself for mind-controlling Obama in supporting him, and he didn't even bother looking at his memories. Why? Because he can only control minds like a vampire but not read their minds. Thomas has tried this several times and he never succeeded. No, he didn't. Thomas said, though Vlad squinted his eyes on him. I feel like you're lying and saying the truth at the same time. All right, let me tell you about the peace treaty. Vlad then proceeded to tell him about the peace treaty that he and the previous US President John F. Kennedy had signed. It's just a simple treaty about monsters and humans minding their own businesses. In layman's terms, as long as the humans wouldn't come and provoke the monsters would also do the same and mind their own business. And so, this peace treaty has been passed down from president to president. Now, after Thomas took his office, the previous President Barack Obama should have told him about the peace treaty. Obviously, the peace treaty is very confidential, and aside from Vlad and the US presidents, no one else knows about this peace treaty. I see. Then can I perhaps see this peace treaty? Thanks to Vlad's rambling about the peace treaty, Thomas has managed to buy enough time for his vampiric guards to arrive and sneak behind Vlad. Yeah, sure. I think I have it here some whole dot. Just as Vlad was about to take out the peace treaty from his cape, he failed to notice the gestures that Thomas was sending from his hand to his vampiric subordinates. Before Vlad knew it, someone suddenly leaped from his behind and stabbed his shoulder with nothing but his hand with long sharp fingernails. Just by looking at this in shock, Vlad quickly realized that his attack was none other than a vampire. Aren't all vampires under him? Although his son, Dracula, was famous as a vampire, that doesn't mean he's the king of vampires. Just so you know, before Dracula came to be feared, there was Vlad, who instilled terror amongst the humans. And now he was sneak attacked by none other than a vampire, who are supposed to regard him as someone akin to their god. However, after seeing the cold face on his attacker's face, Vlad seemed to have realized something. You're not from my clan, are you? Vlad squinted his eyes at his attacker before turning his attention back to Thomas, who was now smirking at him in victory, as if the attack had successfully killed him. I should have expected this. What clan are you? Don't tell me you're from Carmela's clan? No, that would be impossible. You're a male, and one thing she hates the most are males. Vlad started muttering to himself while walking forward towards Thomas, who frowned and backed away, though seeing the blood gushing out of Vlad's shoulders after his movement caused the penetrated hand to slip away from the hole, he gained some slight confidence that Vlad is injured and wouldn't be his match for now. However, much to Thomas and his subordinates' shock, the hole on his shoulder started healing at a very fast rate, and before they knew it, the gaping hole had already been closed and there was now a wrinkled skin replaced. Sure, vampires have very fast healing rates, however, it isn't as fast as Vlad's. If it's just a simple injury such as a cut or bruise, then there wouldn't be any problem. However, the injury is a gaping hole, which means it's missing a large chunk of flesh. Healing such an injury isn't supposed to be that fast. Shocked? Just as I expected, you're just a lowly vampire. Not worth mentioning. Vlad shook his head in disappointment before countless voices from his human bodyguards were heard just from outside of his office. Mr. President, we heard the ruckus. We're coming in right now. The voice outside the door shouted before smashing the door open, and quickly, countless bodyguards in suits swarmed in and surrounded Thomas, doing their job to protect him. However, instead of seeing intruders, they only saw this standing by himself along with a smashed window. Mr. President, are you okay? We're bringing you to the clinic now just in case. A man approached him and said before they all started moving and followed Thomas, who was guided out of his office. Though they noticed that the president seemed to be in daze. Though they ignored this, as their job is Thomas's physical safety, so this matter should be left to the president's personal doctor's hands. Though one thing they didn't notice or will never notice was the flaming determination that sparked in Thomas's eyes. His determination to wash away this humiliation by conquering the entire monster world. Wait for me, you monsters, I will turn you all into my slaves. Thomas angrily said to himself as he clenched his fist. While Vlad has unknowingly caused some changes in the human world, Jin and the monsters have finally finished turning the castle from a hotel for monsters to a true safe haven for monsters. You can't deny how hard the monsters have worked throughout the entire week, either just to prepare for the humans' second invasion or were just left with no choice. This feeling is quite good. Jin smiled to himself as he felt the strong winds smashing against his face as he looked down and watched the hotel turn from a normal castle to an impenetrable fortress in just a week and a few days. There's no reason for the monsters to fear the humans. As long as you give them enough confidence and be their pillar, they could conquer the world if they wanted. Jin said to himself and noticed that Mavis was sitting on the rooftop, her gaze seems to be distant. Jin could tell that something was wrong, so he decided to approach her and ask what is wrong. What's with the face? Don't tell me you're gaining weight again. Jin flew down and landed on the rooftop beside Mavis and teased. It's not that. Mavis quickly blushed and pouted as she refuted Jin's claim. Then, do you mind telling me what's wrong? I'm kind of a good listener myself. Jin shrugged his shoulders and said before sitting down beside Mavis. I was just thinking about Gramps. He never came to my birthday party this year. He promised that he would come. Although Mavis was hesitant, she still surrendered and told him her current problem. You're really close to him, huh? I could understand that. I also feel the same towards my late grandparents. Late? Oh, I'm sorry. Mavis then offered her condolences. It's fine. It's all good now, at least I know that they're already in good hands. Jin smiled and said while also looking at the night sky with a distant look. Mavis stared at his face and couldn't help but be in daze as she stared at him. Just as she was about to make her move, someone suddenly shouted behind them. My little Mavie! Grampy's here! An old but energetic voice suddenly interrupted their sweet moment. Chapter 138, ch 134, Reuniting with an Old Friend. Holy rabies! It's Gramps! Mavis's previous sad expression suddenly shifted into an excited one as her smile was from ear to ear. Vlad's finally here, huh? I thought I'd never be able to see him. To be honest, when Jin heard that Vlad always visits the hotel during every birthday of Mavis, Jin was undeniably excited to meet another old friend that he made. A friend where he truly made an impact in this world. If it wasn't for him, then perhaps Mavis would grow up the same as her canon self, never feeling the love of a mother. A world without Martha. Just by thinking about it, Jin almost felt bad for Dracula in another timeline. Specifically the canon event timeline. Although Jin doesn't know if timelines exist, however since the multiverse exists then that means timelines also exist, right? Who knows, perhaps he would know in the future if he somehow encounters one. Jin then proceeded to stand up and pat his ass before following the excited Mavis who has already gone to see her grandpa. This time, instead of flying, Jin decided to enter through the window where he got back in Mavis's room. Jin walked outside and started walking on the hallway while using his chi sense to see where Mavis currently is. Since everyone's chi is practically unique and different, he has to recognize one another's chi in order for him to identify them just by using his chi sense. They're downstairs. Jin said to himself. Aside from Mavis, Dracula, and Martha's Kais, he also sensed a new one. It's probably Vlad. Jin made an assumption in his mind and he's 100% sure he's right. After Jin found the stairs, he quickly descended and behold, he was right as Jin saw several figures downstairs and one of them is an old-looking pale man that looks like he's about to die any moment now. And then, this beautiful girl just started dancing out of nowhere. Of course I had to dance too or else she might suck me dry. Ahem. I think that's enough for today's stories, Dad. We have a surprise for you. Dracula coughed and quickly stopped Vlad before his stories might become vulgar once again. He then continued while tapping his fingers against each other. Surprise? Aren't I supposed to be the one with the surprise? I missed out on Mavis's birthday. Vlad grumbled and immediately pinched Mavis's cheeks, showing just how much he dotes on her. It looks like my impact on him is much larger than I expected. Jin silently chuckled to himself after seeing him interact with his family. This interaction is a huge contrast to how he should be if this is canon, where Jin never exists. Anyways, where's the surprise then? Vlad continued while pretending to look around. Behind you. Suddenly, someone patted him on the shoulder while speaking. Vlad's senses suddenly went all-time high as he didn't expect to not sense the person behind his back. So he panicked and quickly turned around. However, instead of seeing an unfamiliar face just like always, Vlad's eyes widened in surprise at seeing a very familiar face. The face that he has been searching for years. Jin, is that you? Vlad sniffed and tears started welling up on his eyes while looking up and down at Jin, as if wanting to make sure he's the real deal and not just a fake that he constantly deals with almost every single day. Ever since Jin disappeared, Vlad has contemplated his life and realized that there is more to life than just sucking human blood or playing with them. And so, he tried to change and he was successful. He found new hobbies, changed the way he treats Dracula thanks to his observation towards humans on how they treat their children. Not only that, he even encouraged his clan to follow his path and change also. With his authority and their loyalty towards him, they also started to change. Vlad even decided to operate on the human world and created the peace treaty in order to make sure that there would be no war between humans and monsters just in case both parties were to go against each other. In doing so, he kinda acts like a medium between the human and monster worlds, making sure there is peace between both sides. When Mavis was finally born, Vlad kind of neglected his duties as a peace between both sides as he occasionally visits his son, Dracula's hotel whenever he had the chance, especially when it is her birthday. He even made contact with the rising religion of Jinn, or in other terms, Lucifer. Unfortunately, it seems like the religion is quite cautious and he wasn't able to meet the person behind the religion. His earlier encounter with Thomas, the new president of the USA, made him contemplate and decided to inform Dracula about the sudden variable in the human world. Aside from his clan, no one knows, even his own son, that he ventures into the human world and operates there. He knows how cautious and alarmed Dracula is when it comes to humans, especially after they almost killed his wife, which became the reason why he decided to build a safe haven for all monsters, so what happened to him, won't happen to anyone. That is something that Dracula swore to himself. And now, his reason for coming here is not only to inform Dracula but also to prepare him just in case a war breaks out between both sides. However, after seeing Jinn, all of these vanished in his mind as his only focus right now is Jinn. Slowly walking forward, Vlad engulfed Jinn in a manly hug. "I missed you, Jinn, everyone does." Vlad smiled tenderly and patted Jinn's back before separating himself from him. "You know, when Dracula mentioned a surprise, I thought he would finally give me the coat that you gave him. I've always wanted that coat." Vlad chuckled and looked at Dracula teasingly. "Dad, it's a treasure. It's not meant to be used or else it might get destroyed. I don't want to take any risks." Dracula curtly replied. Is this what celebrities feel like when their fans value their small properties such as towels or even a water bottle they drank? Jinn's mouth twitched at Dracula's blatant show of him idolizing Jinn. "It's just a coat, Dracles. No need to treat it as a treasure." Jinn chuckled and said, much to Dracula's embarrassment. "About that, I was kinda thinking of giving it back to you." Dracula scratched the back of his head and said before disappearing in a second and appearing a few seconds after. After his appearance, Dracula was already carrying the coat in his hands. Looking at its clean appearance, Jinn could tell how much Dracula appreciated it and probably cleans it himself every day. "With the upcoming war with the humans, I think it would be suitable for you to wear this again." Dracula smiled and said while handing out the coat towards Jinn. Of course, another reason for this is because he wants everyone to recognize Jinn in the war. In the previous war, Jinn was wearing the same coat, so it kind of became his symbol. Once some old monsters see him wearing his old coat, their memories would surely juggle up and remember what happened in the past and how Jinn became a hero to the monsters. Sure thing. Naturally, Jinn doesn't know what Dracula is thinking, though that doesn't mean he would refuse, as he did miss this coat very much. This is a coat that he got tailor-made back in the Corona Kingdom. This coat is obviously black while the color of the inside is red. This is the basic coat of Jin Kazama in Tekken 6, and as someone who has Jin Kazama's template, he naturally fell in love with it and had it tailor-made for him. Unfortunately, in order for him to wear it, Jin has to turn back to his human form as he wouldn't be able to wear it due to his large wings. While Jin decided to keep the coat for now and wear it once the humans arrived, Vlad was staring at Dracula in both shock and confusion. "Hold on, Drac. What did you say earlier? A war on humans? How did you know about this?" Vlad raised the question and everyone in the area looked at him. "What do you mean, Dad? Humans attacked the hotel a week ago and Jin predicted that they would come back with much stronger forces." Dracula answered. "Is that why I encountered several structures and traps outside the hotel? I thought you were just increasing the defense of the hotel due to your paranoia." "Well, that's not the case, and what do you mean, how did I know about it? Do you also know something?" This time, it was Dracula's turn to ask a question. I suggest you all sit down. This is quite a long story." Realizing that he got caught earlier than he expected, Vlad sighed in defeat before sitting down and recounting his experience and his involvement in the human world decades ago. "What were you thinking, Dad? What if the humans attacked you? And peace treaty? Really? Where did this sudden trust in humans come from?" Dracula barraged him with several questions after discovering that Vlad actually involved himself with the humans and even contacted their leader, which is unusually called president. It's a long time ago. I kind of met this human woman. Just as Vlad was about to start another story about him, Jin suddenly gasped in shock. This didn't go unnoticed by others and they quickly asked what's wrong. The blinding flash traps I set sent me an alarm. Which only means one thing. Jin then squinted his eyes and continued. It seems like humans really can't keep it to themselves. Chapter 139, ch 135, Second Wave of Human Invasion. While Jin was having the reunion with his old friend, Thomas sensed the urgency to start his conquest towards the monster world after his encounter with Vlad. Which is why, he quickly deployed his army general to join the mission of starting the war with the monsters. Although Thomas wanted to use the nuclear warheads, he doesn't want the area that he wanted to conquer to be littered with radiation. Not only that, he doesn't even know what kind of effects radiation would give to monsters. Who knows, maybe radiation might enhance them or something. It's too risky to try. Not to mention, the entire world would be informed once he did that. His mind powers are limited, they're not as powerful as someone like Professor Xavier from X-Men. That's why he can only send a large portion of the country's army under the guise of a military drill to the media so they won't try to snoop in. Although his original plan was to let the world know about the monsters, however, after a series of variables that shouldn't have happened, he decided against it in the meantime and investigate the monster world first before that. Thanks to the secret entrance information that they got from the imprisoned monster in Area 51, Thomas was confident that this time's expedition would bring him good news. And now, all he's just going to do is to sit in his office and wait for the good news. Unfortunately for him, there would be no good news coming for him. A few minutes earlier, before Jin meets with Vlad, 10 choppers were flying over the deep forest. Inside the choppers were several soldiers that were armed to the teeth, looking like they were going to a war. Though that really seems to be the case if you know the reason why they're armed to the teeth. The army general didn't even inform us on who we're fighting. He just sent us all of a sudden. One of the soldiers spoke and said to his fellow soldier beside him. A newbie? Kid, let me tell you one thing I learned in the military. If you're suspicious about our higher UPS, I suggest you keep your mouth shut and keep it to yourself if you still want to live. The soldier that he spoke with rudely replied, though you can't blame him as from his words alone, you can tell that he's been through the same situation or encountered a similar situation. And now, he simply doesn't want the same thing to happen to a newbie. Oh okay. Although the soldier that earlier expressed his suspicions felt a bit offended, however when he saw the serious look on his face, he decided to just heed his advice and shut his mouth. He still has a family back home, and if what the soldier told him is true, then it would indeed be better for him to just mind his own business. Bravo 69, we're entering the target territory. Prepare for ambush just in case. Soon enough, they heard their pilot speak through the speakers of the microphone. Since this is a closed chopper, unlike other average choppers, they don't need a headset to speak with each other. The soldiers inside the choppers quickly held their rifles tightly while inhaling and exhaling, trying to calm themselves. Even though they were already prepared for battle the moment they joined the army, however this time, their higher UPS didn't inform them anything about their enemy, so they're like entering the enemy's territory blindfolded. Meanwhile, the pilots of the choppers were sharpening their eyes as they looked around, trying to be cautious to see if there was any ambush that was waiting for them. Similar to the soldiers, they weren't also informed about their situation. The army general only told them to be cautious while entering the territory, and once they see a large castle in the distance, that's their cue to launch their attack. Unfortunately for the pilots, not only were they not informed, but a surprising trap has already laid right in front of them. All it takes is for them to enter the range before light blooms the entire area. Zoom! As soon as the entire vicinity was covered in a bright light, all the pilots were blinded and quickly panicked, accidentally swerving the choppers left and right. Their altitude were also descending due to this. Mayday! Mayday! We've been blinded for some unknown reason. We need backup. And due to their descending altitude, some choppers accidentally crashed against several tall trees in the way due to the area being a deep jungle. Despite the challenging terrain and being taken of their vision, some of the choppers decided to trust their guts and started calming down, breathing in and out as they stayed still until their blindness subsided. Fortunately for them, the blindness soon subsided and they finally regained their vision back. Although their vision was still a bit blurry, but it's better than nothing, so they stayed still and never moved the chopper unless they fully regained their vision back. Unfortunately, they lost 4 choppers due to the trap, as they could see the burning crashed choppers on the ground while 2 were smashed on a tall tree. So the previous 10 choppers that came in has now became 6 choppers. This is Bravo 69, we just lost 4 choppers, requesting permission for extraction. The pilot of the Bravo 69 chopper didn't hesitate to call for their higher-ups to report what just happened. There was a small delay before the person on the other side of the radio finally responded. However, the response is something that he doesn't like. Request denied, proceed with the mission, over. Roger that. The pilot clenched the radio and responded after taking a deep breath. Damn it, they're practically sending us to our deaths. The pilot cursed silently while his co-pilot couldn't help but agree with him. Perhaps we should take the ground this time. There might be more traps ahead if we continue with the chopper. Whoever set this trap knew that we're gonna be using the chopper. The co-pilot recommended, and the pilot contemplated his words. This is a good idea, and since they need to be cautious, they have to take the ground. However, they couldn't proceed with this plan without the higher-ups' permission. So, with a bit of hesitation and expectation of being rejected, the pilot once again grabbed the radio and called the other side. This is Bravo 69, urging caution after encountering a trap. Requesting clearance to land and proceed on foot, over. Just like the previous one, there was once again a short delay and the pilot nervously clenched the radio. There's a slight hope inside him that this request would be accepted. Fortunately, the answer soon came. Request accepted. Clear the ground and proceed on foot. Though your destination target is quite far, so you have 3 days to arrive at the targeted location, over. Seemingly holding his breath as he waits for the answer, both the pilot and co-pilot released their breaths and sighed in relief after getting the permission from the other side. Although the person on the other side is right, it is much better than being on a chopper that is very dangerous once they encounter more traps. Charlie 2P, Bravo 69. Initiating descent for a ground landing. Maintain surveillance, ensure no hostiles on the ground, over. The pilot of the Bravo 69 called another chopper around, and it didn't take long before he got a response. Bravo 69, this is Charlie 2P. Copy that. Surveillance engaged, monitoring ground for potential threats. Safe landing, over. Alright boys, we're landing on the ground. The pilot then called the soldiers that his chopper was carrying and announced. The soldiers all sighed in relief. Although they weren't blinded by the flash of light, they were scared shitless when the chopper started going in circles and even heard the pilot screaming Mayday, which only means that the chopper is experiencing a huge problem. What is the problem exactly? Crashing. While the remaining 6 choppers all landed on the ground one by one, the soldiers all swarmed outside, full of caution in their faces as they inspected their surroundings, making sure they won't encounter any more traps and possibly an ambush. Unknown to them, a certain individual is watching them from the skies. Well, that trap failed a bit. Jin said to himself, while Tigress responded from his side. Since she was taught by Master Oogway himself, of course Chi Flight were also taught to her, and even if he didn't teach it to her, Jin would. He knows how advantageous and important flying is when it comes to combat. If your opponent doesn't have the ability to fly, then your chances of winning against that opponent would be increased by at least 50%. How is it a fail? From what I can see, the trap is successful. They lost 4 of those metallic beasts. Tigress said confusedly, although Jin already told them about the humans and their technologies. However, in Tigress's view, the chopper is very similar to a large beast except that it is made of metal. For the last time, kitty, it's a chopper. And yes, it's a fail for me since I was expecting to eradicate at least more than 5. Jin replied while rolling his eyes. Chopper or whatever, it's still a metallic beast for me. Tigress said. Suit yourself. Jin shrugged his shoulder and said. So, what are we gonna do now? Tigress then asked while looking at Jin. We'll follow them. I want to see how they would fare to my improved Vietnam traps that used to hunt them during World War II. Jin grinned menacingly as he replied to Tigress. Chapter 140, ch 136, Second Wave of Human Invasion 2. Let's rest everyone. The previous pilot of Bravo 69 decided to take charge. Fortunately, there weren't any protests from the others. After landing their choppers on the ground, they took a slight rest before proceeding with walking on the ground, leaving the choppers from their positions right where they landed. They weren't worried about the chopper being stolen as the pilots have the keys, and not to mention, they're in the middle of a deep jungle, who's gonna steal the choppers, rabbits? Unknown to them, rabbits wouldn't be stealing their choppers, but a devil would. Now this is a nice gift. There's still 3 months until Christmas, I didn't expect to get a present at such an early day, thank you, Santa. Wait, does Santa Claus exist in this world? Hey, a food for thought. Jin said to himself while floating in the air. He waited for a few minutes before they left the area, so they wouldn't see him stealing the choppers. Time to work these muscles off. Jin grinned while kissing his biceps. Ugh, is there really a need for you to do that? Tigress said with slight disgust in her tone, though Jin could tell that she didn't mean it, she's probably just not used to him kissing his own muscles. Says someone who kept biting these muscles every time we have sex. In return, Jin gave her a teasing that surely made her blush. It was the heat of the moment. Tigress looked away and said. For now, she was staying in her human form and so is Jin. As they aren't in the hotel and no one is here aside from them, they decided to take their human forms. Obviously Jin's reason is because he's too uncomfortable in his devil form as the evil thoughts kept surfacing in his mind and he got tired trying to suppress them. As for Tigress, maybe she just wanted to be in the same form as him or any other unknown reason that Jin wouldn't divulge himself in. Let's go. Jin decided to put it in the back of his head for now and focus on his current goals, which is to take every chopper back to the hotel, and since the hotel is quite far, this might be a long journey, not to mention he has to avoid the walking soldiers lest he attracts their attention on him. Mind you, he's going to carry a chopper and if they saw a chopper in the sky, the first thing they would think is that the chopper on the sky is theirs. Maybe 30 minutes or a whole hour before I could take every chopper to the hotel. Scratch that, it's not a hotel anymore, it's more like a true safe haven for monsters by now, so I should give it a name. Jin kept murmuring to himself that even Tigress rolled her eyes and decided to ignore his murmurs. Is it really that hard to talk inside your mind? Tigress said inside her mind. They stood near the choppers and Tigress couldn't help but gasp in shock as she stared at the huge metallic monster in front of her. No matter how she sees it, she still can't believe that this huge thing could be invented with nothing but brains. You know, most people in her world rarely use their intelligence when it comes to these things, they'd rather use and improve their battle IQ and body. Shocked? Just wait till you see their tanks. Those monsters were almost indestructible back then. Jin chuckled at seeing the shocked expression on Tigress's face. As a former human, he felt proud of seeing this reaction coming from her. Tanks? Are they more monstrous than this? Tigress asked in shock, are humans really this capable of these kinds of things? The last time she encountered a human back in the previous world before this, humans could only wield swords and bows. She then remembered what Jin used to tell her back then. About how she shouldn't underestimate the humans as their capability to produce, their incredible ability to adapt and finally, their intelligence is what makes humans terrifying. Before humans have the ability to verbally communicate with each other, beasts and animals dominate over them. Especially the dinosaurs. Though Jin is not sure if humans exist during the Triassic period. But one thing for sure, they started from the lowest in the food chain to the highest in the food chain. This just shows how awesome humans are. And also how terrifying they could be if given more time to improve. Unfortunately, back in Jin's world, the peace that has ensued in the world has also become the reason why technology isn't making any more advancements except for entertainment technologies such as phones and any other gadgets. Don't even mention the useless things that are being constantly invented and sold to the masses. As for the masses, they bought those useless items and never even used them. Don't even get me started on made-in-China products. Jin's face twitched just by thinking about it. They're far enough, let's take all these back home. Jin said before stretching his limbs and used his 2 arms and placed it beneath one of the choppers. Just like old times, haha. Jin chuckled to himself and remembered back then before he got reincarnated, lifting those coins just to get his cheat. What do you mean old times? Tigress, who was on another chopper, preparing to lift it like he did, heard what he said and asked in return. Nothing. It's a little secret between me and God. I'll tell you soon enough. Jin grinned and mysteriously replied to Tigress. I don't like your mysteriousness one bit. Tigress deadpan stared at him while expressing her annoyance at Jin being mysterious and all. One thing she hates the most is overthinking. And now she's going to overthink what Jin just said. Unknown to Tigress, she wasn't the only one suffering from this disease. A lot of women back on Jin's world also suffer the same ill. How about we carry these big dudes now yet? I'll tell you everything once all of this is done. Jin said in reassurance, and what he meant by all of this is his job to keep an eye on the gods of the multiverse, and to settle in a peaceful universe with his women before starting a family with them. Tigress didn't reply anymore and simply carried the entire chopper with her strength. Meanwhile, Jin also did the same, except this time, he doesn't have to clench his ass cheeks when lifting the chopper. His strength is enough for him to carry 2 choppers at once, though that will slow him down, so he could only carry 1 chopper at a time. Now that think about it. Why does it feel like this universe's humans are quite dumb? I mean, couldn't they just leave several soldiers to guard the choppers, but instead, they brought everyone with them. Either they're dumb or they're probably confident that no one would be able to steal their choppers. They're probably not expecting me then. Jin smirked, and with one slight push, the entire chopper was lifted off the ground despite having its engine off thanks to Jin's lifting strength. Beside him, Tigress has already carried the chopper on her shoulders. She's only waiting for Jin so they could head back to the hotel. Let's go, Jin said after noticing that Tigress has been waiting for him. Soon enough, both of them took off in the sky and slowly disappeared on the horizon. They took a different path this time, as the soldiers might discover them if they somehow use the same path that they used. Back in the hotel, every monster was on guard. Even the infamous Bigfoot was standing tall, towering the entire castle with his enormous size. To be honest, when Jin first saw him, he thought that Bigfoot was enough to defeat the human invasion, which in turn also made him curious why Bigfoot was afraid of humans. And so, Jin asked him about this, and his reply shocked him quite a bit. Humans are very annoying, they kept pestering my peaceful life, so I decided to hide from them. It turns out, Bigfoot wasn't actually afraid of humans unlike the other monsters. Bigfoot is just a peace-loving dude who would rather avoid the humans rather than killing them. And because of that, Jin's respect towards him increases very much. This also proves one thing to Jin. That not all monsters are afraid of humans. Perhaps some of them have the same reasons as Bigfoot or other reasons. Back to the current situation, one of the monsters, specifically a skeleton, was in charge of watching the west side of the wall that is built around the castle when he suddenly saw 2 huge metallic monsters in the sky that resembled the same metallic monster that invaded them a few weeks ago. Invasion. Everyone the humans have invaded. The skeleton didn't hesitate to ring the large bell beside him that quickly resonated across the entire area. Back to Jin, when he heard the bell ringing throughout the entire vicinity, he couldn't help but slap his forehead as he realized that he forgot to inform them about his plan. Well, the plan is too sudden and he just made it up earlier on the spot, which is why they weren't informed. Damn it, I'll see if I can use this. Seeing the incoming several witches on brooms coming towards them, Jin was left with many choices, but he wanted to try to communicate with them through his telepathy. He doesn't have the time to practice it as he was too focused on heavy power, or in other words, his telekinetic power. Hopefully, this works. Jin muttered to himself before his mind power surges and slowly covered the area in front of him. This surge is invisible so no one can see it, even him. Chapter 142, ch 137, Second Wave of Human Invasion 3. Humans. Humans have invaded. All the witches shouted with all their might while fearlessly driving their broomsticks towards the choppers that they perceived as the humans invading them. Stop! All of you! It's me! Suddenly, they all stopped in unison when they heard Jin's voice inside their head. My lord! They all said in unison as they quickly looked around, trying to find Jin's figure. Ever since Jin took charge of almost everything, the monsters started respecting him and even going as far as calling him their lord, similar to what the witches just recently said when they heard his voice inside their heads. In front of you, ladies! Jin said once again inside their minds. The witches quickly looked in front of them, however, the only things they saw were the choppers that were invading them. W was the lord captured by the humans. One of the witches said with slight fear in her tone. The other witches all shivered at the same time, thinking that the humans are so strong that they managed to capture their lord. No, you misunderstand. Take a closer look at the chopper. Jin once again spoke inside their heads and they once again followed what he said and stared carefully at the chopper. As soon as they did, they finally saw the small figures under the chopper. From what they could see, these figures looked like they were carrying the choppers. My lord! The witches said once again in unison. If Jin didn't know their origins, Jin would have thought that they are all twin sisters or something. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. They all have different origins and the only thing that they're all the same at is that all of them used to be humans until they discovered black magic or sorcery, as humans back then liked to call it. Yes, it's me. Now can you all please tell those guys that there are no human invasions right now, it's just me. Jin told them. From the sound of his voice, the witches could tell he was exasperated, so they quickly sent 5 witches back down towards the castle to bring down the news to the other monsters who were waiting for their signal. Since they have the ability to fly and use magic, Jin has assigned them as the scout and to send the signal to confirm the validity of human invasion. Thank you. Jin sighed in relief. One thing he wouldn't like right just as the war between both sides are getting started is being attacked by his own teammates. In gamers' terms, a friendly fire. I thought we would have to fight our way through. Tigress teasingly said. Thankfully, that doesn't seem to be the case. Replied Jin with a sigh of relief before continuing. Anyways, they should have informed the rest by now. Jin then resumed his flight and slowly decreased his latitude while moving forward. Tigress also followed suit and flew downwards. A few seconds later, they landed on the ground. The monsters quickly surrounded them and among them was Mavis, Dracula, Elsa, and Rapunzel. All of them were looking at the monstrous helicopter that they just brought. Is this the monstrous metal that humans have invented? Wayne fearfully stepped forward and tried to touch the chopper with his long fingernail. Tack! It's so durable. Murray said when he heard the sound created by the collision of Wayne's fingernail and the chopper's body. Yes, it is. Unlike the others who were looking at the chopper in fear, Mavis, Dracula, Elsa, and Rapunzel were different. They were flabbergasted by seeing the huge chopper and many questions kept popping up in their minds. What is this monstrosity? How can humans who used to be so backward and full of deception manage to create this kind of thing? Last but not the least, if humans can use this kind of monster, does that mean they can also use it? Jin, can we use this? Soon enough, curiosity got the best of Dracula and he couldn't help but ask the million-dollar question to Jin. As long as we have the keys, then yes. Yes, we can control the choppers. Jin grinned and dropped the bomb. How wonderful it would be to see monsters using the technology that the humans invented and using it against them. Unfortunately, there are no monsters here that are smart enough to replicate human technology. Jin shook his head in disappointment. If only he got a genius character template like Tony Stark, then that would be really wonderful. Although he can already fight and fly with just his body alone, however, it is still one of his dreams to put on Iron Man's suit and enjoy flying in the air with it. There are still 4 choppers like this. So, we're going back again and delivering it all here. In the meanwhile, I need you all to bring this chopper and the next choppers somewhere secretive, away from prying eyes. I don't care where it would be placed in as long as it's not in the open, understood? Jin quickly snapped them all from their minds and gave them the order. Let's go. We still have at least 2 flights back and forth. Jin said to Tigress before flying. Since there are 4 choppers and each of them can carry 1, then obviously they would have to go back and forth 2 times to bring all the choppers in the hotel. It's just simple math. While Jin and Tigress were focused on their current goal of stealing the choppers, the soldiers weren't lucky as they encountered several traps set up by Jin himself. He took inspiration from the Vietnam traps and improved them all, changing some things to make it more effective. The first trap they activated is the sledgehammer trap. Basically, this trap is centered around smashing the head of a soldier once they found a shack and tries to open it. Once the door is opened, the trap would be triggered and the sledgehammer full of nails would be smashed towards whoever is in the door. What did he improve on this, you might ask? Since the nails are not that long, Jin decided to make the nails very long, so this trap managed to kill 3 soldiers at the same time, unlike the usual 1 soldier per sledgehammer trap. The moment 3 of them died thanks to his sledgehammer trap, they became more cautious and decided to enter the shackle with their guards raised very high. Fortunately for them, there were no more traps inside the shack that turned out to be empty without anything inside except cobwebs and such. However, at least that's what they thought at first, as the moment they stepped outside, hundreds of bees suddenly greeted them. It turns out, the moment the door was opened earlier and triggered the sledgehammer, it also triggered one of Jin's personal traps. Combining his chi with the traps, he managed to make hundreds of bees compiled in a single nest where the moment the door is opened, the next would break apart and release all of these bees. The bees first attacked the lookout soldiers outside the shack before waiting for the rest of the soldiers to come out of the shack. And so, the moment they all stepped outside, chaos ensued as the soldiers weren't prepared for this kind of thing, so they could only panic and run around like headless chickens. Fortunately for them, the bees soon flew away after a few moments of critically injuring almost half of the soldiers. It is almost as if they were being controlled by something and that control faded away after time has passed. Damn it! Retreat, let's go back to the choppers. The enemy is prepared this time. They're probably beat seeing the injured people and 3 dead bodies on the ground with their faces full of holes thanks to the sledgehammer full of long nails. Their unofficial leader, the pilot of the Bravo 69, realized their dire situation and didn't hesitate to issue a retreat in order to save the injured and to avoid more traps just in case they encounter more as they proceed with their journey. Thankfully, none of them refused him, as the only thing they want is to get out of the hellhole they are currently in. Just watching these traps almost decimate their entire forces instilled slight fear over them. If they can't even handle such traps, then what would have happened if they faced the enemy themselves? And so, they traced back their steps and successfully returned to the area where they left the choppers. However, what they saw soon shocked all of them. Because they saw nothing. The choppers that were previously parked on the ground are already gone. Looking at the marks on the ground just confirmed that the choppers were indeed here and they weren't just lost. What's going on? Where are the choppers? The pilot of the Bravo 69 is almost going crazy as he kept scratching his head while looking around before looking back at the soldiers and asking them the same question. Unfortunately, no one seems to know the answer as they all just looked at one another with the same confusion plastered in their faces. The sun is setting down. We can't stay here any longer. After taking a breather to calm himself, they all noticed that it is already getting dark and they need to set up their small camp and try to use their radio to call for their backups. What they didn't know, their every move is being watched and calculated by a certain individual. Chapter 144, ch 138, Illusion is the best tool in strategy. Awoo! Hearing the howls of the wolves, the soldiers cautiously looked around, using their thermal visions to see at night. It took them almost an hour just to get to the shack, so that also means it would take them another hour to go back to their choppers. It's been 30 minutes since they encountered the traps and so far so good. They haven't encountered any on their way back, mainly because they're using the same path that they took, so it's already safe. Unfortunately, the constant howls and sounds of moving bushes keeps them very much awake and alert at all times. Never giving them time to rest due to it. Spread the rations. The soldier in charge of their rations dropped down his huge bag and started handing out rations to the soldiers near him, who passed all the rations to those who are far away from the soldier who has the rations. I feel like something is wrong, Jeff. One of the soldiers approached the unofficial leader of the platoon, the pilot of the Bravo 69, whose name turns out to be Jeff. It's just a gut, soldier. We don't use our guts to dictate our decisions. Jeff said while looking at the soldier with stern eyes. Why yes sir. The soldier gulped his saliva in fear and saluted before walking away and went back to his camp. Because of so many losses with him being unofficially in charge, Jeff felt responsible for the loss of 3 soldiers' lives and the injury of almost half of the entire platoon. Because he wanted to prove himself to his superiors and get a high chance of being promoted, as the president himself was the one who approved and initiated this mission, Jeff thought that if he does good enough, he would be noticed by the president and get the credit that he deserves. However, after experiencing such defeat from the traps alone, Jeff knew that his goal of climbing in the rankings would be null after this. It's like climbing a ladder, but the ladder is already very old and on the verge of breaking down the more he stays. Unless he does something good that is enough to erase the mistakes that he made. Unfortunately, that would be impossible, as the traps alone gave them such pressure and almost on the verge of being completely eradicated. So, Jeff made a decision to abandon the mission lest he makes more mistakes and he would get demotion instead of promotion. After setting up the camps and all the tents, the soldiers who were previously famished but now their stomachs are full thanks to the rations, took turns in guarding the camp and serving as a night guard. They're in the middle of a deep jungle, so they can't afford any risks. Unfortunately for them, they're moving exactly as Jin planned, and soon they will experience true horrors of invading the territory of the monsters. It was late at night and there were only 8 night guards patrolling around. Aside from them, everyone was already fast asleep. Just as everything was going fine, the night guards suddenly heard another howls of the wolves. However, there is something different this time, as the howls were much closer to them, as if they were sitting right beside them. The patrols quickly pointed their flashlights forward and saw nothing but darkness thanks to the lack of the sun's presence to give them light. Just when the patrols were thinking that one of them should step forward and patrol the area further away from the camp, when several red eyes suddenly started appearing in the dark. What scared them even more was the fact that these red eyes that blinked out of nowhere in the dark are surrounding the entire camp. Alert everyone! Everyone's blood ran cold immediately as soon as they realized that they were being preyed on by the wolves. One of the soldiers quickly ran back towards the camp to wake up and alert everyone in the camp. Meanwhile, the remaining patrols just pointed their rifles forward, maintaining cautiousness as they watched over the red eyes surrounding them. Once one of them moves, they would blast the area around with their bullets. However, they must prevent doing that without the remaining soldiers from the camp giving support. So they could only wait for the remaining soldiers to grab their rifles and eradicate the wolves that had surrounded them. Back in the camp, everyone quickly jumped out of their ground beds and grabbed their equipment, more importantly their rifles. Soon, all of them spread out and noticed that the camp was being surrounded by red eyes that weren't moving an inch, but instead, they kept watching over them as if playing with them. "Sir, do we shoot?" one of the soldiers asked Jeff with a loud gulp of his saliva, an indicator that despite being prepared to shoot the wolves that are surrounding them, doesn't mean he's not afraid. "Hold. We'll wait for them to attack first," Jeff said while squinting his eyes at the wolves that are blending in the darkness. If it wasn't for their red eyes, perhaps they would have failed to perceive them in the first place. "Just so you know, their thermal visions have limited batteries, so they can't use it at all times." "Yes, sir." The soldier nodded his head and said, though he didn't salute in return as he had to steady his aim on the wolves. A single mistake can cost him his life. However, after 5 minutes had passed, there were no reactions from the wolves. So they decided to use their thermal visions to see why they aren't moving. As soon as Jeff put on his thermal vision, his eyes widened in shock at seeing nothing except for bushes and the trees. It's like the red eyes that were giving them terrors were nothing but illusion. "How is this possible?" Jeff muttered with shock and confusion in his voice. Up in the air, Jin was laughing his ass off while Tigress simply just rolled her eyes at him. "Alright, this is really fun. I might get addicted to it." Jin even wiped off the tears under his eyes just from laughing at the soldiers' reactions. "I feel like this is cowardly. Aren't we supposed to deal with them head-on?" Tigress complained with a pout. "This is a strategy, my dear kitty," Jin said while giving her a side eye. "A strategy?" Tigress tilted her head and repeated. "Yes, this is called an attrition strategy. The goal here is to wear them down over time by consistently applying pressure and minimizing their ability to rest." Jin diligently explained that even grade school students would be able to understand. "I see. So we're tiring them out and then deal with them head-on at the end." Tigress finally understands Jin's plan and can't help but be amazed at him for being able to create such a cunning but genius strategy. Unknown to her, this strategy is well known to humans as they were the ones who created this strategy in the first place. It's just that his way is more effective than the humans could achieve after all. They can't use illusions unlike him. How was he able to create illusions, you may ask? It's really simple. Telepathy. As someone who is training his telepathy, this is the best way to train it. By constantly using it and challenging himself by using hard techniques such as illusion created by Jin by manipulating through their senses. As Jin has expected, the soldiers soon let their guards down and sighed in relief. Though it is unusual to see many red dots which they thought were red eyes at first. However, they just blamed it on their lack of sleep and focus. A/N, plot, what can I say? After seeing that they were back at their camp and were about to sleep again, Jin grinned and decided to manipulate their other senses. Since he's already done with their sense of sight, now it's time for their sense of touch or feel. Back to the camp, aside from the soldiers who quickly went back to sleep so they could still wake up in the morning with vigor, Jeff was the only one who stayed awake. He was staring at the ceiling, inside his mind. He was thinking about what they saw. There's no way that's just a hallucination from lack of sleep and exhaustion. However, before he could further think about it, he suddenly noticed that his surroundings were shaking. He even saw his ration plate and canteen shaking and falling down on the ground with a thud. The first thing that came to Jeff's mind was that an earthquake is suddenly occurring at such a critical time. Soon, Jeff heard the patrol shouting outside his tent once again. "Earthquake! Everyone, there's an earthquake!" Soon, every soldier is once again outside their tents, trying to find a wide space that they could stay in so no trees or rocks would fall on the top of their heads. However, just as they found a large space with the help of their night vision providing them with direction, the earthquake suddenly stopped, much to everyone's dismay. Although some of them sighed in relief, most of them are irritated and annoyed that they couldn't get enough sleep and the exhaustion is once again taking a toll on their bodies. If this continues any longer, they might not survive the night. Just how long will these nightmares end? Chapter 145, ch 139, Fear the Monsters. While some are cursing the deep jungle they were in, some are concerned about these phenomena that just keep appearing one after another. Experiencing something like this might be rare, but that doesn't mean it's a coincidence. At least that's what Jeff is thinking. After experiencing their defeat from the traps earlier, he has become more cautious towards this place. They tried using their portable comms to call their higher-ups, wanting to know who their enemy really is. However, they received nothing from the other side. It's like they're completely abandoned in this place. Either there is no signal or the higher-ups have decided to ditch them in this place, leaving them alone to fight the enemy that they don't have any knowledge on. At first, Jeff thought they were fighting the Veets again, however he doesn't have any specific evidence to prove it beside the traps that they encountered. Everyone, go back to sleep. One of the soldiers, who were coincidentally also a pilot like Jeff, announced loudly while clapping his hand several times to get their attention. The soldiers quickly sighed in relief and immediately went back to their tents to get their sleep. Albeit it's a little too late now, as the sun is near on rising up. However, while the soldiers were walking back to their tents, Jeff was the only one who decided to stay outside. Cautiousness can be seen on his face. Meanwhile, Jin was interested in seeing such complex emotions on Jeff's face. He has long read everyone's mind in the entire camp, and he knows who can be spared and who is not. Let's just say only 1/3 if the entire platoon would be left after he's done with them. This Jeff isn't that bad. Jin nodded his head in approval and said, "Well, Jeff isn't anything special like the main protagonist in the story. However, his story is still unique in its own terms. Jeff is more like a villain in a story. From such a young age he has lost his parents in a car accident, rendering him an orphan. However, is that all? No, for some unknown reason, he has extreme bad luck which made him make many accidents in the orphanage, including breaking a vase or even being chased by a bunch of bees. Because of this, Jeff was left with no friends, no parents, and even the staff in the orphanage hates him. Due to this, he was left with nothing but to escape from the orphanage and start from the scratch, eventually ending up in the army due to his lack of money to provide himself. He wasn't educated, nor does he have some knowledge about making money. With his incredible bad luck, it's almost a miracle for him to be promoted in the ranks and even participate in this mission before ending up as its unofficial leader. So now, Jeff was trying his best to make ends meet just to be promoted and be able to at least have a family that he could provide. Because of being poor, Jeff doesn't have any love life, and instead, he's focused on his own life, evading any accidents due to his bad luck. If I didn't know this was the Hotel Transylvania world, I would have thought this guy is some kind of protagonist in a novel or something. Jin chuckled to himself before proceeding to observe more. This time, he won't be doing anything. Since almost all of them wanted to get out of this place and were on the verge of despair, he wanted to see their reactions once they saw that their only way out of here is gone. Disappeared out of thin air. Myohi. Jin unconsciously leaked a small laugh out of his mouth while tapping his fingers against each other as if he was some kind of pedophile preying on another victim. Meanwhile, Tigress was already asleep. This strategy of Jin somehow bores her, so she decided to go to sleep in one of the tall trees that she found. Soon, 2 hours have passed and the morning has finally come. The soldiers went out of their tents with eye bags under their eyes. They didn't get enough sleep, and even some of them couldn't sleep from the constant howling of the wolves. "Everyone, get up and destroy this camp. We're going back," Jeff loudly announced. He wasn't exempted, as eye bags were also seen under his eyes. From his slightly sluggish movements, you can tell that he clearly hasn't gotten any sleep. It didn't take long before the camp was fully destroyed and they resumed their journey back to the choppers. While walking, Jeff was having a bad feeling. His intuition keeps telling him that something doesn't feel right. Nothing should have happened to the choppers, right? We clearly took everything from it, so there's nothing left to steal there, and even if there was, it's probably not that important. Inside his mind, Jeff kept assuring himself so he wouldn't fall into a state of anxiousness and panic. It took them several minutes before they finally arrived at the mark that they left previously so they wouldn't be lost when going back. Are we sure it is here?" One of the soldiers scratched his eyes and said confusedly, thinking that he was hallucinating again like last night. "Where are the choppers?" What he said is true. Even Jeff couldn't believe his eyes and thought that he was also hallucinating or they were in the wrong place. However, seeing the same mark that he made himself, tells him otherwise. This can't be real. The choppers are gone. The soldiers all despaired the moment the realization hit them. Images of their families and friends flashed before their eyes. Without the choppers, they would starve to death here. Just for your information, they crossed a wide sea just to arrive at this place. Which means going back on foot is literally impossible. Try the comms again, this is impossible. Jeff stuttered and said, sadness and regret can be seen in his eyes. He was sad that his comrade's death is imminent and the reason is him. Regret, because he regretted that he couldn't live his life to the fullest thanks to his shitty luck. This is my fault. Because of my bad luck, they were also affected. Jeff closed his eyes, not wanting to look at his fellow soldiers' despair in their eyes. All the blame would be eventually put on him if they somehow knew about his bad luck. What are we gonna do now? The soldier beside him muttered in fear and despair, something that Jeff doesn't want to hear the most. Now, it's time for the witches to play. Up in the air, Jin grinned and sent a telepathic message to the witches nearby to begin their onslaught. Today, humans would fear the monsters once again. Jeff was sitting on a large stone with a long stick on his hand. He was drawing doodles on the ground while deep in thinking when suddenly, 2 soldiers approached him and asked, "Sir, what do we do now?" "There's nothing we can do." Jeff simply replied with a monotone voice. Jeff then looked up and saw some of the soldiers resting on the ground while some were trying to make contact through their comms. However, seeing the look on their faces, Jeff could tell they weren't successful in making contact with the outside world. "Look! There's something in the sky." Suddenly, one of the soldiers noticed something in the sky and quickly pointed at it, making others abandon what they were doing and look at the sky where the soldier was pointing at. "What are those?" "Reinforcements." At first, some of the soldiers were happy and hopeful that their message was heard. However, after the reinforcements got a little closer, they realized that the reinforcements that they thought were reinforcements turned out to be not the reinforcements that they were expecting. "Are those green-skinned women on brooms?" one of the soldiers with binoculars said as he looked through his binoculars. "What?" Jeff couldn't believe what the soldier with the binoculars said, so he snatched the binoculars from the soldier and used it himself. "What the fuck?" Jeff couldn't help but curse out loud as the soldier's words turned out to be right. There were 20 green-skinned women on brooms flying in the sky and looking at the direction where they're going. It's obvious that their destination is them. "Everyone get ready." After ignoring his bad feelings earlier before discovering the missing choppers, Jeff felt it once again, and this time, he won't make any more mistakes and trust this feeling again. "Aim your weapons. Once they enter your 6, shoot at will." Jeff shouted in command before taking a rifle himself. "Fire!" After the witches flew closer, Jeff didn't hesitate to give out the order to shoot at them mercilessly without confirming if they're enemy or not. He's simply trusting his gut feeling here. Something he shouldn't do. Seeing the soldiers pointing their weapons at them, the witches looked at one another and nodded their heads all at the same time. They were fully informed by Jin about how a human weapon works. So before coming here, they're completely prepared. Taking out small pumpkins carved with creepy faces, they quickly threw it towards the platoon before tilting their brooms upward, evading the bullets at the same time. Brrrrtt. Thud, X20. As soon as the pumpkins landed on the ground, nearby soldiers looked at it with confusion. Seeing that the pumpkins seemed to be glowing in red inside, the soldiers could only stare in confusion before an explosion engulfed their ranks. Boom, X20. Chapter 146, ch 140, Fear the Monsters 2. Away. Insert Wilhelm scream. Several soldiers immediately lost their lives while some were lucky that they were away from the bombs. These lucky soldiers were coincidentally the good ones that Jin read earlier, while those that died and got critically injured from the bombs were once again coincidentally the bad guys that Jin read in minds earlier. How could such coincidence even happen? Soon, the soldiers didn't manage to maintain their formation for too long, as the death of their comrades has sent their minds into a state of panic and their survival instinct roamed across their minds. Like a chicken without a head, the soldiers all scrambled around while using their rifles to shoot at the green-skinned witches in the sky, hoping that they would at least kill one of them. Unfortunately, the witches were prepared and they quickly took out several totems that they destroyed with their bare hands. As soon as these totems crumbled under the sheer force of their grip and the pieces escaped through the gap of their fingers, a green transparent hue suddenly surrounded them and every bullet that came in contact with this barrier was deflected. "Make sure to target only those without my chi marks, okay?" Jin whispered in their minds through his telepathy. It's pretty obvious that he's sparing only the good ones while the bad ones would come and meet each other in hell. This is also one of the few things that he personally taught to the witches, since aside from them, no one is adept in sorcery and magic. So he taught them about the chi sensing and how to perceive them. Of course, Jin only taught the chi sense and nothing else. It's not like he's stingy or something. He's just being cautious as he doesn't want to shoot himself in the foot by doing so. The witches all nodded their heads at the same time and proceeded with throwing more bombs towards those without Jin's chi marks. Thanks to them scrambling around, which just makes it more easier for the witches to eliminate the soldiers without the chi mark. Any reports on the unit that we sent in? Thomas was watching the monitor where several red and blue boxes can be seen. Inside these boxes are the soldiers that they just sent. Each box contained the soldier's picture along with their heartbeats. This is what they used in order to watch over the unit without having the need of using their satellite, as the range of their satellite doesn't cover the place where they sent the unit in. So they would have to resort to this kind of mechanic. For a whole day, they have been watching the screen and all of them were very confused on the reason why the soldier's heartbeat kept increasing and decreasing for some unknown reason. What's their status? How come they kept dying as if they were being hurted? Thomas asked the question to his army general, who was also confused. They could understand losing 3 soldiers on the first day as they expected the traps, but to lose almost half the unit in one single moment? Did they somehow trigger a bomb trap or something? I tried contacting them, but it is as if they're intentionally ignoring our calls. An operator typing on his keyboard said with a sigh while rubbing his forehead. No, that is something that they wouldn't dare do. According to their last call, this is where they landed their choppers, and now, it is also this place where they're dying. Something is definitely wrong on the mission. The president told us that the monsters are harmless and in fact, scared of us humans, right? If so, then who are they fighting with? The army general patted his finger on the table while wondering to himself. Could it be that Dracula is making his move? But that's impossible, right? The death of his wife hit him so hard that he even came to fear humans. Thomas wasn't exempted, as he was tapping his finger on the table too. Something has to be wrong. All of this doesn't make any sense. Thomas anxiously continued his tapping. That the others grew irritated by it. However, would they complain? Of course not, unless they want to be fired from their work, then they could only endure the president's habit of tapping on the table. If somehow, our platoon failed, what should we do, Mr. President? Seeing the continuous blue bars turning red, which indicates that the soldiers are dying, the army general soon predicted that the platoon would soon be wiped out. So they have to come up with a new plan. As the army general, he was obviously informed who their enemy is this time, and fearing that the monsters would see this as an act of aggression, they would retaliate against them. The army general doesn't know how strong the monsters are, he can't just base it on some novels about Dracula or something. May God bless America. The army general silently prayed inside his mind. While the army general is already praying inside his mind, the president was thinking deeply about what the army general asked him. If we somehow failed, then what's next? Thomas resumed tapping on his table, much to everyone's annoyance, but they could only grit their teeth and endure it. All right, that seems to be all of them. Jin stretched his arms while counting the remaining soldiers, who were all shivering on the ground in fear. Their rifles were useless against the witches and their mysterious transparent hue that shields them from their bullets. So now they could only cower on the ground and stare in the sky with despair and almost no hope in their eyes. It seems like they have given up fighting back, as it is futile. However, much to their surprise, the witches suddenly stopped and remained floating in the sky, looking down over them with creepy grins and smiles on their faces. Welcome to the monster world. Suddenly, they heard a voice behind them. They quickly tried to turn around to look at the source of the voice. However, their exhaustion and despair had taken a large toll on their bodies, so it was a bit slow and they even had to use the ground as a support just so they could turn around. Who are you? Among the survivors was no doubt Jeff, his chapped lips showing how exhaustion and in need of water right now. You see, I decided to show you all mercy and spare all of you. But hopefully, this mercy of mine won't backfire on me someday. So I'll be sending you back to your higher-ups with a small message from mine. Jin grinned and said. The soldiers all gulped their saliva in fear, imagining what torture would be bestowed upon them. Since Jin is on his devil form, the soldiers finally knew who they're fighting with. They're fighting with monsters and devils. How come their higher ups even thought of sending them without giving them knowledge that their enemy is a monster? Oh, don't you all worry. It's just a message, I swear. Seeing the scared looks on their faces, Jin realized that they must have misunderstood him, so he quickly assured them. However, did that help? To be honest, no. Who in their right mind would just randomly believe the words of an enemy? Only an idiot would do that, and they're not idiots. Sigh, never mind. Why would I even bother explaining it all to you guys? It's not like you would believe an enemy's word. Jin shook his head and said when suddenly someone stood up among the soldiers and replied to him. I believe you. When Jin turned to look at who it was, he was surprised to see it was Jeff who spoke up. Boy, what's your name? Jin pretended to not know him in order to maintain a strong but mysterious persona in their eyes. He even called him boy so he would appear to be older than him even though Thomas is pretty much older than him. My name is Jeff. Jeff said his name without hesitation. In his mind, there's no point in cowering in fear or begging in forgiveness as he knew that if the person in front of him wanted him and his dead, he would have long done it so. Which means Jin has a purpose for them and hearing him say that he would use them to send a message to the higher-ups, Jeff knew that Jin wasn't lying about it. Jeff. Well, you just landed yourself a good badge. Jin smiled and said before approaching Jeff in a steadfast manner. He then proceeded to remove the badge that is pinned on Jeff's uniform before it went into flames much to everyone's shock. If they didn't know they were just on a battlefield earlier, they would think they're watching a magician in a theater. I could smell bad luck from your boy. Let me guess, you've been encountering bad luck throughout your entire life, right? Jin grinned and said while pretending to have sniffed the air in front of Jeff. Meanwhile, Jeff's eyes widened in surprise. Looks like I'm right, aren't I? Well, today will be the day you experience your first good luck because you met me. Jin then patted Jeff's shoulder and then looked at the others. Jeff was confused but still nodded his head out of courtesy. Now, I need you all to pass this message to the president or higher-ups I don't care about. Jin then continued and proceeded with his message while the soldiers perked their ears up, making sure they would not miss anything. You may control nations, but remember this, my family is the line you don't cross. If you dare to hurt them, the power you wield won't shield you from the storm I'll unleash upon you. Chapter 147, ch 141, Fear the Monsters. 3. Are you sure about this report? If I caught you lying, you will not only be fired but I'll make sure your family won't find any will to live again. Inside the White House, the office of the president, Thomas was sitting on his chair while reading the report that the remaining soldiers of the unit gave to him. After 2 days since the mission was given to them, the unit was finally able to call back to them and report their situation. After hearing that the unit that they sent was almost wiped out if it wasn't for a man with horns and wings sparing them, Thomas was both outraged and confused at the situation. Instead of encountering some known monsters like Dracula or Frankenstein, instead they encountered a being they called the devil based on his appearance that resembles a devil depicted by the Christian religion. So, after hearing their situation, the army general didn't hesitate to call the rescue squad to extract the remaining unit out of that damned forest. And here they are now, each soldier was writing their reports based on their own perspectives and Thomas was reading them one by one. Why yes, Mr. President. Everything written on those are true. One of the soldiers said with a nervous expression. He's nervous not because he's lying but because the fear towards what he experienced in the monster world is still fresh in his mind. Correct me if I'm wrong but in every report that I read, it says that this devil took one of you, specifically your acting leader during the operation, am I right? Thomas stopped and stared at the eyes of the soldier, much to his nervousness before asking. Why yes, Mr. President. His name is Second Lieutenant Jeff Benson. The soldier nodded his head and answered in confirming. I see. You're dismissed. Thomas waved his hand and said after getting the information he needed. Although he can use his mind's ability to take the information that he wanted out of the soldier's mind, however, he would only do so once they're out of public because his mind ability isn't as perfect as it seems. There's a side effect of erasing memories of a person if he used it on them or worse, completely turned the person brain dead. Although Thomas isn't someone who cares about such pathetic creatures, however, like what he said before, he'll only do it once they're out of the public. As of now, the army general and several of his advisors are also in the office, so it's too risky to use it now. After the soldier left the room, Thomas and the rest in the office were left to contemplate about the report. This is unbelievable. I thought Dracula was the only one who is considered a threat. The army general couldn't help but ask Thomas in confusion and doubt. Be silent for a minute, I'm thinking. Thomas said and threw a stern glare towards the army general. The army general could only silently sigh and step back to let the president think by himself. Something definitely isn't right. This devil. Thomas muttered in his mind while taking a paper out of the folder. On the folder is a rough sketch of Jin based on the soldier's description of him. He doesn't look like someone from this world. Thomas clenched his fists while staring at the paper with Jin's face sketched on it. A horrible thought has appeared in his mind. This is definitely a reincarnator like me. There's another reincarnator out there beside me. Thomas crumpled the paper while yelling in anger inside his mind. His feeling of being unique in this world is already gone. And seeing that this devil is already on the monster side, another terrible thought has appeared in his mind. Hopefully, he hasn't met with Mavis yet. Thomas breathed in and out while the army general and his advisors were looking at him like he's a weirdo. Though they weren't obviously showing it. While Thomas was praying to the god that reincarnated him, hoping that Jin hasn't touched Mavis yet. The main character of the story had a surprise back home when he got back. As soon as he entered the door of the castle, he was met with a black furball smashing against his chest before wrapping her arms around Jin. What the? At first, Jin was expecting either Rapunzel or Elsa to hug him out of the blue, however when he got a closer look at who hugged him, it turns out to be none other than your favorite vampiric goth. Mavis. Seeing her rubbing her head against his chest, Jin nervously looked at Dracula, expecting a shocked look on his face. However, to his surprise, Dracula and Martha were standing side by side while looking at them with warm and loving eyes. Something that Jin wasn't expecting considering the current situation. It's fine now. Mavis happily purred while assuring Jin. She can hear from Jin's heartbeat that he got nervous when she hugged him. Who are you, Tigress? Jin's lips quivered when he heard and felt Mavis purring on his chest like a little cat. Can someone please tell me what's going on here? Jin said while looking around. He also saw his women looking at him as if they were proud or something. Let's talk later. For now, let's focus on our current trouble. Dracula stepped forward and said while Mavis happily tiptoed away after separating from Jin. Seriously, what's wrong with every woman I encounter? Jin mentally shook his head and decided to ignore this for a while. He got an interesting individual behind him. Jin, who's that guy behind you? Dracula has long noticed someone standing behind Jin and he has been longing to ask Jin about it. Oh, him? Don't worry, he's a human soldier. Before Jin could continue his words, the monsters quickly pointed their nails and claws towards Jeff while some backed away and hid behind Dracula's back. Guys, relax. He's harmless without a weapon. Trust me. Jin chuckled while calming them down. How do we know he's harmless? Eunice stepped forward and asked in doubt while doing her usual posture, placing her arms under her non-existent bosom. Grr. Frank, are you talking behind my back again? Eunice suddenly felt like someone was talking bad about her, so her first suspect was none other than her husband as he's the only one who knows her the most. Me again? Why me? Frankenstein replied while sighing in exasperation, indicating how tired he is by enduring Eunice's personality. And now, you're talking back to me, hey? It seems like you have grown some balls even though you just stitched someone else's balls on your crotch. Eunice then proceeded to further humiliate Frankenstein, who could only close his ears from the noise and smiled in relief after seeing that it was effective. Meanwhile, all the men in the hotel including Jeff felt bad for Frankenstein for having such a bad wife. If this was back in my world, women would definitely shout girl power or something. Jin chuckled inside his mind before going back to the current topic. If you still think he's harmful, then how about someone test it out? Jin confidently said while looking around. The monsters were shocked by Jin's words and quickly looked away, not wanting to be picked by Jin to test if Jeff is truly harmful or not. Even Jeff was shocked by Jin's words. Just so you know, the moment he stepped inside, his entire hairs on his skin all stood and shivered at the same time. If he wasn't a trained soldier, perhaps he would have pissed himself now just by being stared at by countless monsters that could only be seen in fiction movies and such. What have I gotten myself into? Jeff regrettably said to himself. Oh, if only he could turn back time, he would have definitely chosen to go back to his homeland. However, for some reason, he agreed to stay behind and come with Jin. Even now, my bad luck is still trying to make my life worse. Hey. Jeff mentally chuckled to himself before turning his attention back to the monsters. Hopefully, the monster that would be testing him out isn't as creepy as Frankenstein or the huge Bigfoot he can see behind the crowd of monsters. Blooeyag. While the crowd was looking away, someone suddenly raised his hand among the crowd. What's unusual about this was that the hand was green and waving around like a jelly. The crowd quickly stepped away from the monster who bravely raised his hand. Surprisingly, it turns out to be Blobby, the green jelly monster. Blob? Put down your hand, are you crazy? Wayne and Griffin were shocked that Blob dared to volunteer himself, so they quickly tried to convince him otherwise. Unfortunately for them, Blob turned stubborn this time, as it seems like something is driving him for making such a decision. Well, good luck, Blob. Don't go overboard on him. Jin then gave Blob a thumbs up before turning around and joining the crowd. However, he first patted Jeff's shoulders and whispered, "Don't hold back either. This will determine if you can stay here or not," Jin mysteriously said before walking away. "I didn't even ask for this. You just tempted me to come with you by telling me about my luck problem." Jeff's mouth twitched and he said to himself before looking at Blob, his current opponent. "I mean, he's just a blob of jelly, it shouldn't be that hard, right?" Chapter 148, ch 142, Showdown. Jeff was sweating heavily. He can feel it in his hands and beads of sweat trickling all over his body. In front of him is Blobby, who was stretching his jelly body by imitating the limbs of a human. To be honest, Blobby isn't actually that strong. He's just a blob of jelly. Yes, just jelly. At first, Jin thought that Blob had some kind of acidic jelly inside him that could melt matters. However, he remembered in the movie that Blob was used to save Johnny from falling, forcing him to land inside Blob. And nothing happened to Johnny that time. Jin also tried it himself and even asked Blob about it. Unfortunately, he's just a blob of jelly without any offensive attacks. But that doesn't mean Blob is weak, because his defense is top-notch. Even stronger than Jin's defense himself. In fact, not only defense but also Blob's vitality. Not only Blob is immune to physical attacks like a slime in fantasy novels, he's also near unkillable due to his regenerative abilities. As long as there's a single dot of jelly remaining of Blob, he would be able to regenerate himself back to his prime in just a single minute. So in Jin's eyes, Jeff is no match against Blob, despite having no offensive attacks. Is there a courtesy like bowing or something? Jeff assumed a boxing stance while asking Blob about their culture when it comes to sparring. He thought that since they're a whole different species from humans, they must have some kind of different culture than the humans. Seeming as if he understood him, Blob shook his head and stood still. At least that's what it looks like to others, but to Blob, he's already assuming his stance. "Any reason why you took him?" Tigress asked Jin, who was beside her. "Just my guts, combined with his unique aura that gives him bad luck, but I also feel like he's an important person in this world," Jin answered, his eyes never leaving Jeff's figure. Wanting to uncover the mystery shrouding Jeff. "I see. You know, I noticed something." "What?" Jin replied while his eyes never leaving Jeff's figure. "You're not training yourself anymore." Tigress then pointed at his body. "Hey!" Jin was surprised by what Tigress said. He wasn't actually expecting it. "I said, you're not training anymore," Tigress repeated while pointing at his body again. "I mean, I just trained my psychokinesis before this, right?" Jin remained oblivious to what Tigress was hinting to him. "I'm talking about your body. You're not training it anymore. You also rarely fight using your body." As a Kung Fu master who has dedicated herself to training one's own physiology, Tigress was annoyed that Jin was ignoring his martial arts and bodily strength, and instead, he seems to be addicted to his psychokinesis ability. "Well, I'm just focusing on improving what I currently lacked. As of now, my body strength is at its peak while there's more room for my psychokinesis to improve." Jin made a good enough reason and said. "But what if you get addicted to the feeling of fighting someone without using your body?" Tigress said with a disheartened tone. Jin chuckled and patted her head. Though he was contemplating what Tigress just said. As a matter of fact, Tigress was right. Because of the pleasure of sitting behind the scenes but still being able to kill your enemies gives Jin a sense of euphoria. The same feeling that he felt when he first fought back in the Kung Fu Panda world. "I should train my body sometimes, hopefully, my martial skills are still good as new." Jin looked at his own body and said to himself before shifting his focus back to Jeff and Blob. "What should I do? Should I attack first?" Unlike Jin, who knows all of Blob's capabilities, Jeff was the opposite. Since he's not sure what Blob can do, Jeff was left to worry about whether he should strike first or let Blob strike first. Why is he just standing there? Jeff raised his eyebrow as he noticed that Blob was standing still while staring at him. Jeff then mistook this kind of attitude into something else. Is he letting me strike first? Jeff whispered to himself, thinking whether he should take the bait or not. Oh God, please turn off my bad luck at least just for this moment. Jeff gulped his saliva and prayed in his mind. Though losing doesn't seem bad also, as he would be spared and seen as harmless by the monsters if he lost this battle. That's right, I should just throw this fight then. Jeff confidently said to himself, sighing in relief that he doesn't have to risk himself when there's nothing bad for him to lose. That's when he felt a burning glare at the back of his head, and when he turned around, he saw the devil, Jin, glaring at him with stern eyes. Jeff quickly turned his head back to Blob and threw his plan away on the window. He definitely knows what I was planning to do. Jeff wiped off the sweat on his forehead before breathing in and out. All right, Jeff. You can do this. It's just a blob monster, even my nails can probably hurt him. Jeff assured himself, trying to give himself some confidence that he dropped earlier. He took a deep breath and began to focus on Blob's jelly figure, taking notes of several sides where he could attack first. After making the decision, Jeff didn't hesitate anymore and quickly ran towards Blob. Obviously, Jeff wouldn't yell on the top of his lungs, as such things only happen in movies. It's seriously a dumb thing to do in a fight. Huff. Jeff has long removed his gloves, so instead of punching the big blob of jelly, Jeff decides to use his nails instead, as his instincts tells him that it is more effective than just punching him. And it turns out, he was right. The moment he arrived in front of Blobby, Jeff was like a rabid cat, constantly slashing and slashing his nails on the front body of Blob. Although he could feel the slimy feeling being inserted inside his nails, Jeff ignored this and blindly clawed his way through the body of Blob. When he saw several jellies dropping down on the floor, Jeff was happy, as he thought that he was doing something, but when he saw that Blob's entire body was still intact without any signs of damage that he just did to him, Jeff was both shocked and confused. What? Jeff muttered in confusion while Blob happily stared at him as if watching a child playing on his father's beard. Blurg. Although Jeff cannot understand what he's saying, however, guessing from the way his body shivers and the sound he makes, Jeff comes to an assumption that Blob is laughing at him, or at least his attempt to hurt him. It doesn't matter. I don't care whether I win or not, in the end, losing will give me the best benefit. Jeff mentally shrugged and waited for Blob's turn to attack him, so he stood in his place. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. 1 minute. After waiting for almost a whole minute, Jeff finally noticed what was wrong. Not only was Blob not attacking him, but he's just standing in his place watching him like he's some kind of toy. IADM. Just as Jeff was about to admit defeat, Blob quickly made his move and inserted one of his jelly-made tentacles inside Jeff's mouth, so he wouldn't be able to surrender. Blurg. Jeff was being suffocated while feeling like he's gonna puke at the same time. Ugh. Elsa and Rapunzel both made a disgusted expression, while Jin was surprised to see such an attack coming from Blob. That's cool, I've never thought of that, he said to himself. Meanwhile, other monsters started cheering for Blob. They raised their hands and chanted both Blob's name and their new motto that Jin introduced to them a week ago. Blobby. Blobby. Monsters, together, strong. Monsters, together, strong. Gluck-K. Gluck-K. Feeling the tentacle moving inside his throat, Jeff was gagging while patting Blob's jelly body, trying to gesture to him that the surrenders. However, Blob was having so much fun doing this to Jeff. So he failed to notice this gesture and was about to enlarge the tentacles so it could go further inside Jeff. Now, I'm feeling guilty about this. Jin quickly stepped in and stopped Blob. All right, we've seen enough. Blob, that's enough. Jin loudly announced, much to everyone's dismay, while Blob could only reluctantly follow Jin's words and removed his tentacle inside Jeff, finally giving him the time to breathe. I'm sorry about that, boy. I didn't expect Blob to attack like that. Jin patted Jeff's shoulder and apologized. He then proceeded to use his chi to heal whatever injury is caused by Blob inside his body. I believe you've all seen enough that this person right here is harmless. Jin then helped Jeff stand up and announced to the monsters. Oh man, the show's over already. Though one of them complained, Jin never cared about it, as the majority among the monsters agreed to him that Jeff is a harmless human. But my lord, is there any particular reason why you brought him here? Wayne asked with a puzzled expression. That's a good question. Jin mysteriously smiled and said before continuing. Have you guys ever heard of spies? Chapter 149, ch 143, Focusing on Self. Spies. They all wondered in unison. While Jin simply left it at that, whatever is running in their minds, Jin doesn't care. He has matters to take care of other than sitting their curiosities. Anyways, see you all later. I still have matters to take care of. Jin waved his hand at them and grabbed Jeff by his collar before eventually leaving the scene. And there he goes, Rapunzel said while watching Jin's leaving figure. So, anyone wants liver cupcakes? Rapunzel smiled and awkwardly offered while looking at Tigress, Rapunzel, and Mavis who just recently joined them. Oh, but I love cream cheese more, so I'll have to decline your generous offer. Mavis's eyes twinkled before returning back to normal and politely declining Rapunzel's offer. That's unfortunate. How about you guys? Rapunzel muttered the first sentence to herself before turning her head to the other two and asked. I'd rather sleep. Tigress shook her head and said before stretching her arms while walking away. She's been out of the hotel for 2 days, watching over those soldiers. So she's going to get her beauty sleep. Not to mention, she's quite angry at Jin for not keeping his promise to her of fighting the soldiers on her own. Either he forgot about it or he did it on purpose, who knows. Me too. Elsa also replied and said. Oh come on you guys. Fine. I'll just eat by myself then. Rapunzel pouted and stomped her way towards the dining hall. While every monster was left confused and to think about what Jin just said. The main character of the story was walking on the hallway along with Jeff, who is just as much as confused as the other monsters. What do you mean, spy? You want to use me to become a spy? Obviously, despite being driven by curiosity, which is the reason why he's here, Jeff is still a human by heart, he still has his humanity. So there's no way he'd betray his race by being a spy for the monsters. Oh that? Don't take it seriously, my plan for you is more than just a spy. Jin waved his hand at him and said. More than a spy? What is it then? Raising his eyebrows, Jeff confusingly asked again. Too many questions, look, you'll just be my tour guide, okay? I'm curious about the world of humans, so I want you to lead me there and become my guide. Jin said before entering his room, followed by Jeff. A tour guide? Jeff tilted his head and said. He then noticed that Jin was already changing his clothes and a luggage can be seen placed on the bed as Jin placed all of his necessities including clothes and toothbrush inside the luggage. Yes, a tour guide. But don't worry, I'll take care of your bad luck. It's a simple thing really, do you know Chi? Jin replied while still placing his things inside the luggage. Chi? You mean those Chinese thingies? Jeff has heard of the Chi, however, he only heard it in Chinese movies and such. Qi is some kind of energy that ancient Chinese warriors use, right? Jeff asked, not sure about his knowledge towards Qi. You're half right. However, ancient Chinese warriors aren't the only ones who uses it. Many people such as me also use it and I'm not Chinese. Jin replied and said before closing his luggage and further informing Jeff about what he's supposed to do. Anyways, you'll only work as my tour guide and as we travel across the human world, I'll slowly help you lose your bad luck. Jin smiled and said. Jeff doesn't know whether he should sigh in relief or not, but since he's already here, then he decided to take a gamble. Hoping that his bad luck won't screw him up again. So, are we going now? Jeff asked, though it's already obvious from the fact that Jin has already prepared his belongings and is wearing the perfect attire for the tour. Yep, you see. I wanna have to me time, you get it? I've been focusing too much on either my women or other people. It's time for me to focus on myself. So, I'll be going alone on this journey of mine. Me time? I didn't expect monsters to have that either. Jeff chuckled and said, his view towards monsters is slowly changing. Monsters are like humans too. Just different in appearance and bodily structure. Jin casually waved his hand again and grabbed his luggage. Alright, let's do this. Jin then proceeded to open the window of the room, letting the wind flow inside. We're gonna jump. Jeff gulped his saliva and asked with fear in his tone. It's not like he's afraid of the height of something, if so, then how did he become a pilot in the first place? And a military one at that. What he's afraid of is that he thought that Jin was thinking of jumping through the window alongside him. Oh come on. It's not that high to be honest. Jin rolled his eyes and said before approaching Jeff and grabbed him by his collar. Wait, shouldn't I also prepare myself like taking a bath or something? Jeff tried to make excuses as he thought that Jin was really thinking of jumping through the window alongside him. Completely forgetting the fact that Jin can fly due to him being in a state of fear. You can do it once we're in the human world. Jin curtly replied before jumping through the window and even somersault diving. Yeah. Jeff clutched on Jin's body like a koala, fearing for his dear life. God help me. Jeff loudly prayed. While Jeff was panicking, Jin was holding paper and a PRN while writing down an excuse letter before folding it into a paper plane and threw it back to his open window. Watching it fly inside, Jin happily smiled and used his chi to float in the air. Anyways, he won't have to worry about humans attacking, as he would be informed firsthand thanks to the new traps that he laid back. And just in case, he also placed traps on the nightmare traps that Dracula placed, like a forest full of ghosts and a cemetery guarded by zombies. These were the original traps Dracula did in the movie, but unfortunately, these traps became useless due to the secret entrance that the humans found. Although it is very far away, it still leads to the castle, which is why it's considered as a secret entrance. Opening his left eye, Jeff was flabbergasted that he's still alive and kicking. Am I in heaven? Suddenly, Jeff had a horrible realization. No, son. You're still on Earth, alive and kicking. Though I don't think heaven would accept you. Jin chuckled and said. Oh, thank God. Wait, what did you say? Nothing, boy. Let's hurry up. I want to get there before the sun comes up. Jin said before channeling his chi on his foot solace and flew forward majestically. Wo. Jeff clung on Jin like a koala once again. However, after feeling the wind brushing up against his face, he got calm. His arms on Jin's body loosened a bit. This is wonderful. Jeff muttered to himself. This is the first time he actually felt that flying was fun. His experience as a pilot might have him interacting with the sky, however Jeff never once felt the wind brushing on his face like this. Even the one where he trains in using the parachute, it never gives him an experience like this. I know, right? That's what others also say when they feel this feeling. Jin smiled to himself and said, actively referring to himself when he first flew in the sky before closing his eyes, also wanting to have a feel of the air washing his face. Hopefully, they would like my sudden leave. Jin said to himself, concentrating on his flight. Back in the human world, Thomas was alone in his office, constantly looking outside from time to time. Ever since he encountered Vlad and how his fight with him was one-sided, made him cautious about the old vampire. At first, he doesn't have any idea why everything in this world is so wrong. Because it turns out there's one more reincarnator beside him. At least that's according to Thomas's assumption. That's why he placed not only 10 human bodyguards, but he also assigned 5 vampires near his office. Thomas has always been afraid of death, and that's a real fact. If it wasn't for what happened to him with Vlad, he'd never thought that he was afraid of death. Because the last time he died, he thought that would be his last death, especially since he thought that he's now a strong vampire, a president of America, has 100 of vampire followers, and he knows more about the world than anyone could ever be. With those benefits that he had in his arsenal, Thomas has long forgotten the fear of death. And now that fear has resurfaced, much stronger than ever, making him cautious and fearful of anything bad happening to him at any moment. Unknown to Thomas, his death is imminent and inevitable, because the person who will make him experience death again has just arrived at his own country. Shouldn't we focus on more important tasks at hand? Jeff was rubbing his forehead while reminding Jin, who has already eaten his 5th cone of ice cream. Last. Jin simply said while indulging himself with the tasty flavor of the ice cream in his hand. How long has it been since I last ate an ice cream? Jin now has no regrets in escaping the gloomy castle and visiting the human world. Chapter 150, ch 144, Encountering More Humans. It's already afternoon, are you still going to keep eating foods? Jeff was rubbing his forehead while shielding his face away from the public. He's quite cautious that a camera would catch his face and it would eventually be reported to his higher-ups. Although such a thing is almost impossible, however the possibility is still there. It's not my fault the food is so delicious. Jin spoke with his mouth full. He's currently standing in front of a hot dog stand, eating delicious hot dogs for the 7th time that day. I can't believe how much I miss American foods. Jin silently cried inside his mind. Right now, his entire focus is to relinquish his desire to taste all these tasty foods again. How long has it been since I last ate this kind of food? Jin wondered to himself. Now he never regrets leaving the castle unannounced. Or else he would have to share this delicacy experience with his women. He wants to experience it first, or in other words, again. So? How long till all of this is done? Jeff asked once again, though he also ate a hot dog that Jin is eating right now. However, he just ate one hot dog, unlike Jin, who has like a wormhole inside his stomach. Even the face of the owner of the hot dog stand shows how tired and exhausted he is. Jeff could tell that the hot dog stand owner wants Jin to leave already. Though the problem is that they haven't paid yet. Jin, how are we supposed to pay for all of this? Jeff quietly approached Jin and whispered in his ear. Pay? We don't need to pay for this. Jin took one last bite and swallowed before speaking. At first Jeff was confused until Jin suddenly approached one of the passers-by and suddenly wrapped his arm over the man's shoulders. Hey man! Long time no see. Do you mind paying for this? Thanks. Jin said with a happy tone as if he was reuniting with a long-lost friend since childhood. Just as Jeff and the owner of the hot dog stand were confused, they failed to notice a shine in the man's eyes before smiling and greeting Jin back. Oh my god! Is that you, Jin? Damn man, nice to see you again. No need to worry man, I'll pay for all of this. Much to their surprise, the man suddenly took out $500 from his wallet before handing it to the stunned owner of the hot dog stand who could only take the payment from the man. Thanks man, you're the best. Jin grinned before dragging the also stunned Jeff by his shoulder and quickly left the scene. While running, Jeff finally snapped out of his stupor and hurriedly asked Jin about the earlier event. What was that? How did you do that? Do you really know that man? It's not wrong to say that Jeff was both excited and afraid. Excited because this is the first time he was seeing some kind of illusion or mind technique like the ones he sees in social media. Know that man? Nope, I don't even know his name. Jin simply shrugged his shoulders and answered Jeff. Then how did you do that? Do you think you can teach me? Jeff asked another question and asked a favor. It's a magician's secret, as for teaching you? Well, I'm not taking any students at the moment unless you're a big fat panda. Jin waved his hand sarcastically and said. Speaking of a big fat panda, Jin suddenly remembers his first student, Po. One day, I'll definitely go back to that world. Jin whispered to himself. A/N, of course he would, especially now that a new Kung Fu Panda movie has been released, lol. So, where are we going now? Seeing that Jin wasn't speaking about the topic anymore, Jeff decided to drop it and change the subject. I'm thinking of getting a hotel. Jin rubbed his chin and answered. Hotel? But we don't have any mono right, never mind. Jeff was about to argue Jin's statement when he suddenly remembered what happened earlier, so he dropped it down. Suggest some hotels. Jin chuckled and said. He wanted to see if there are any similarities in this world and his past world. Well, I only know some like the Plaza, which is very expensive if you ask me, and the I forgot its name, it's in Washington, D.C. Jeff snapped his fingers several times while trying to remember the name, a habit that he got used to whenever he tried to recall something very hard. Watergate Hotel. Jin muttered, which was loud enough for Jeff to hear. Yet. It's Watergate. Oh wait, how did you know about it? Jeff was about to praise Jin for giving him a hand when he suddenly got suspicious. I read it in your memory, no sweat. Jin quickly gave a good enough reason to avoid suspicion. There's a reason why he muttered that hotel, because it is the hotel where he booked in before he got reincarnated in another world. It may seem irrelevant, but Jin starts to care for very little things that he could remember before he gets reincarnated. His memories of the past made him who he is. And he shall not forget that. Oh, so you could also read memories and even the forgotten ones, hey. That's cool. Jeff nodded to himself and calmly said. Though deep inside he was dying in jealousy. He also wants superpowers. I mean, who doesn't? Well, let's stay in the Watergate Hotel in the meantime. Jin stretched his limbs and said. It's time for him to take a rest. Anyways, he already confirmed that this world is quite similar to his world, except that the president of this year is a different person. Shouldn't the president of America be Barack Obama? Who the fuck is this Thomas Spikeberg? His surname sounds Russian. Jin said to himself. He previously discovered that this president has also surprisingly conquered many of its neighboring countries. So, this guy is a conqueror but at the same time, pacifist, since he spared Asia. Jin tapped his chin a few times while wondering to himself. Soon enough, they entered a dark alley and he suddenly grabbed Jeff and yanked him on his shoulder. Obviously, in order to leave, they would have to find a spot without any eyes and proceeded to fly up in the air. He can't turn invisible yet, of course he could just manipulate everyone's senses so they wouldn't see or feel him, however that doesn't include the cameras and CCTVs, so he has to stay cautious. Back in the hotel, Mavis was tiptoeing on the hallways, carrying a tray full of delicacies, such as cream cheese, bug juice, and many other foods that only monsters like them would eat. Knock, X3. Jin? I brought you some food, are you there? Mavis knocked on the door 3 times before calling out to Jin's name. However, after receiving no reply, she called out again but to no avail. Jin wasn't responding. Is he asleep? I mean, Tigress also fell asleep earlier, so he should also be the same, right? Mavis said to herself before suddenly having a bold idea in her mind. He won't be mad if I peek, right? Mavis fiddled with her finger while thinking whether she should do it or not. Dad says sometimes in life you have to take a leap of faith. Mavis exhaled while unconsciously using her father's advice just to give herself a good enough reason to take a perk inside. All right, here goes nothing. I hope he's not wearing his shirt again. Mavis silently prayed and hoped in her mind before using her X-ray vision to peek inside. However, instead of seeing Jin's jacked body or figure sleeping on the bed, she saw nothing but open lights along with an open window. Hey! Confused, Mavis didn't hesitate anymore and twisted the doorknob and entered the room. Jin! At the same time, she called out to his name. Receiving no reply, Mavis decided to take matters into her own hands and searched around the room, looking for any sign of Jin. For a whole minute straight, Mavis found nothing except for his clothes. I better hide these. Mavis coughed and hid one of Jin's underwear in her pocket. Mavis resumed her search before eventually stumbling upon a piece of paper lying on the pillow in the bed. What's this? Mavis wondered out loud while taking the piece of paper and unfolding it to reveal its contents. Dear, whoever sees this letter first. By the time you're reading this letter, I'm already gone. No, I'm not leaving permanently, I've just decided to visit the human world and see what's up with them. I would dutifully serve as an inside man, so expect my reports about the human world coming to you every week. If you're Tigress, Rapunzel, or Elsa, and if you're not, please tell this to them. Do what you want while I'm gone. Just make sure it's not something I would not like. Also, sorry for leaving without informing you, I know that if I told one of you, the three of you would pester me to come with me. That's all, please pass this message to Dracula and my women. He left. Mavis's hands were shaking as she read the letter. However, it's not shaking because she's scared but because she's excited, especially when she reads that Jin would visit the human world. Remembering that there are good and bad humans, Mavis decided to give the humans a second chance, and this time, she would follow Jin's footsteps so she would encounter the good ones instead of the bad ones. I'm coming with you, Jin. Chapter 151, ch 145, Life Could Be Dream. After manipulating his way on the Watergate Hotel, Jin successfully booked 2 rooms for him and Jeff separately. There's no way he would let them sleep in the same room. Coincidentally, the room that he booked was the same room that he booked before he died in his previous life. What a coincidence. It feels good to be back, but this is not my world, so the feeling is kind of different. Jin would be lying if he said that he doesn't miss his home. Unlike other protagonists, he has a career, a family, friends, and the only thing he lacks is a lover. But he could solve that easily if he wasn't reincarnated. Now that I'm here, I wonder what I'm supposed to do. Jin tapped his chin several times again, since he's already here. And from what he knows, COVID hasn't happened yet, so there are many things that Jin could do thanks to his future knowledge advantage. Perhaps the only difference in this human world is that Apple is the most renowned phone in the world, surpassing even the famous ones such as Samsung. As far as I know, Samsung is just as famous as Apple, so how come Android brands are almost on the verge of bankruptcy now? Jin wondered to himself. I mean, the only way for Apple to beat every phone brand is to become innovative and have a competent CEO after Steve Jobs' death. Jin's eyes squinted in suspicions. If his assumptions are right, then that only means this world is either a different world than he knows or there's an unknown variable that changed this world. Hopefully, it's the former. If it's the latter, either that variable is God or a reincarnator like me. Jin chuckled to himself, thinking that having another reincarnator is illogical. Wait, I'm also a reincarnator. Jin stopped in his tracks and whispered to himself in realization. But God didn't tell me there's a reincarnator, right? No, relying too much on him would result in a 50-50 positive and negative. I'll have to answer this myself. Jin said with a determined expression on his face before taking out a laptop that is provided by the hotel by booking their luxury suite. He opened Google and searched for any anomalies besides the Android Apple thing. Now this is a surprise, although I read it in Jeff's mind that the president is different, but I didn't expect it to be this different. Jin smirked while looking at the earliest photo of the president. This guy is surely a vampire in disguise. Jin smirked in victory. Just from the pale face that he can see on the screen, he's already sure that either the president is a crack or a vampire. He can see from the way he always wears black even on special occasions, and not only his eyes were red, he also always wears a hat and umbrella outside even in warm weather. What else could this be but a vampire? Though this can't confirm everything, but it just increases the possibility. Fuck it, I'll see him for myself later. But for now, I need to satisfy my boredom. Jin cursed and stretched his limbs again before searching for anything on the internet. Since this world is quite the same as my previous world except for a few, maybe I could change some events. Jin scratched his chin and continued searching. Jin suddenly stopped typing when a thought came across his mind. Something that made most people back in his world cry. Harem. Jin muttered before quickly typing about the shooting of a gorilla named Harem. Soon, he sighed in relief when he saw nothing about Harem's death. Thank God, he's still fine. What was the date he got killed, by the way? Jin scratched his head, trying to remember the date when Harem was killed. Why was Harem killed, you might ask? Harem is a gorilla in a zoo. He was killed around 2016 after a child fell inside his home or close to him. The zoo staff was then forced to make the difficult decision to shoot Harem to ensure the child's safety. Using tranquilizers is too risky and would just agitate Harem, which might accidentally kill the child. Tisk tisk tisk, if only the parent of the child didn't move their eyes away from him, perhaps Harem would still be alive and breathing. Jin shook his head in disappointment. If you're a parent, then it is your responsibility to watch over your child. Being busy or talking to someone isn't a good excuse to not watch over your child. Idiot humans as always. Jin shook his head again before stopping and raising his eyebrow in confusion. Why did I just say that as if I wasn't born human? Weird. Still, Jin put these thoughts in the back of his head and focused on his current goal, which is to save Harem. But since I don't know when it would happen, I guess I would just have to resort to mind tricks. Jin grinned and said to himself before lying down on the bed. Welp, I guess I will be a bit busy tomorrow. What a vacation, Jin. Jin remarked before closing his eyes and falling asleep, failing to notice that his eyes flashed in red before he closed his eyes. Jin doesn't know how long he has been asleep, but the moment he opened his eyes, he was surprised to see himself in a dark space. Quite similar to God's space, however, instead of being in all white, Jin only saw darkness. So dark that he couldn't even see his own hand. Where am I? Jin said out loud, however he didn't hear his voice, which shocked him and put a chill in his spine. I must be dreaming, but I'm conscious of my dream, which shouldn't be possible, but since I'm no longer a human, perhaps that's why. Jin murmured inside his mind while looking around for any clues he might find. But to no avail, everything and everywhere are nothing but pure darkness. This is getting creepy. Jin also realized that he can't use his powers and abilities. He's powerless in his own dream. I thought I would be able to control my own dreams, that's what it said in the media, right? Jin started to fear for himself. He's in an unknown space without any powers to protect himself just in case. That's when he suddenly heard a voice that resounds everywhere around him. He heard it everywhere, not right, not front, not back nor on the left. It's like the sound has surrounded him. But I am your son. From what Jin heard on this voice, it was an angry male voice that seems to hold deep anger as an emotion. Everyone is my son and daughter, Lucy. When Jin heard the next voice, his voice contorted in shock. The voice sounds familiar. God. Jin uttered the name of the first person that came to his mind when he heard the voice. Noticing that there's still another reply, Jin put it in the back of his mind and continued eavesdropping or whatever he is happening right now. Thankfully, he finally knows who are the two people talking. One is God while the other is a person named Lucy. But I am your favorite. Lucy replied, but this time, there was deep sadness in his voice instead. Jin could almost imagine the current situation in his head, which is quite weird but neat at the same time. In his imagination, he could see God's figure in his white space while talking to a person in front of him. Jin couldn't see what the man looks like, but all he could tell is that this Lucy is a man taller than God in height. Both of them were standing, which is why Jin could tell who's taller. Not anymore. Jin heard God's voice again, but his tone is quite similar to the man named Lucy. The tone is even sadder. I see, it's a mistake coming here. Lucy then clenched his fists and his head dropped down before turning around and walking away. Jin's imagination is so vivid that he could even hear Lucy's footsteps as he walks away. Sam. God tried to call out to him, however, much to Jin's confusion, God uttered a different name instead of calling the man as Lucy. Why does it feel like God's calling me instead? Jin touched his chest and felt his heart beating wildly out of shock for some unknown reason. Don't call me that! Much to Jin's surprise, Lucy turned around and rudely pointed his finger at God before yelling in rage. God stopped in his tracks and could only stand in his place as he watched Lucy turn around again and walk away. Before Jin could further watch what was happening, his imagination suddenly disappeared as if it had popped out of existence. What happened? Just as Jin was about to question what happened, he felt someone forcefully pushing him away, and before he knew it, he was already back in his bed at his hotel room. Jin's bed was soaked with his sweat while Jin was breathing heavily as if he had just gone into a marathon. Which is impossible as Jin never saw himself sweating again after he left the world of Kung Fu Panda, so he was surprised to see himself drenched in his own sweat. Huff, huff, huff. While breathing in and out heavily, Jin could only muster a few words out of his mouth. What was that? Chapter 152, ch 146, Discovering. After having such a dream, Jin quickly drank a glass of water and went back to bed. It's still midnight and there's still 2 hours until the sun comes up, so Jin still wants to take a long rest. However, as if the world doesn't want him to, Jin couldn't get a wink of sleep as the memories of his dream are still vivid in his mind. It was as if he was there himself. Not eavesdropping, but he's experiencing it himself. Jin doesn't know how to explain and he doesn't want to bother trying to explain it. And so, 2 hours have passed and Jin could begrudgingly get up from the bed, frustrated that he didn't manage to get a full 8 hours of sleep. Hopefully, that dream would be the last. Jin silently prayed in his heart. At first, he was thinking of asking God about it, but as if his instincts told him not to, Jin decided against it. Jin doesn't know why his instincts are acting up, but as someone who has always trusted his gut, Jin trusted it again this time. Is Jeff already awake? Jin pondered to himself before changing his shirt and leaving the room to the next room beside his. This, X3. F.B.I, open up. Jin loudly smashed his knuckles on the door while shouting, causing a commotion on the hotel floor. A few seconds later, several heads popped out of different rooms, wanting to witness a possible scandal. Jin even saw someone taking out their phones and possibly started recording what is happening. Though they would be disappointed to see nothing but an average-looking man standing in front of a hotel room door. There's nothing to see here, people. Scurry off. Jin's irises glowed in a moment like a flash and soon, everyone else's irises also shone like his and they all took off their phones and went back inside their rooms. At the same time, Jeff finally opened the door and Jin met a man with an unkempt hair while yawning and stretching his limbs. What time is it? Jeff asked. It's time to save a gorilla. Jin simply answered before continuing. What? Jeff's previous sleepy expression disappeared and was replaced by a confused expression. Save a gorilla? Why does someone like Jin come to the human world just to save a gorilla? Don't ask too many questions. We'll be leaving after 5 minutes, so make sure you're ready or else I'll throw you back to Blobby. Jin strictly said while grinning to himself as he threatened Jeff using Blobby. Not him. Jeff shivered. Until now, he's still having that nightmare. Nightmare of having a tentacle invading his mouth, suffocating him and gagging him. No matter what happens, Jeff doesn't want to experience that again. From now on, Blob is the greatest nightmare in his entire life. The moment he mentioned Blobby, I felt my throat being suffocated again. Jeff touched and held his throat in discomfort. Wondering if it's just this body responding to a trauma. Jeff then went back to his room to quickly freshen up and fix himself. Although he's not sure if Jin is telling the truth and he would really do it if he's late, however, it's much better to be cautious than regret it. In the lobby, Jin was scrolling through his iPhone 7. Well, it's not his iPhone as he just kindly asked someone to let him borrow it. Who knew there were such kind people in this rotten world? Candy Crush? This thing still a trend? Thankfully, there's no TikTok yet, which means this world is still capable of being saved. Jin was scrolling on the App Store when he suddenly came across a certain game that hooked the entire world back then. Flappy Bird, hey? So this still exists. What if I play it right now? Jin pondered to himself. He doesn't want to accidentally rage himself over a game and accidentally causes an accident. Though it might be impossible for him to be defeated as the Flappy Bird game required fast thinking and fast reflexes, or in other words, fast fingers. Hat. While Jin was busy scrolling on his phone, hurried footsteps suddenly greeted him from behind, followed by a ragged breathing of a man. Huff, huff, Jin. Turning around, Jin faces Jeff, who was pale and seems to be out of breath as he was breathing heavily non-stop. Jin looked at the large modernized wall clock in the hotel lobby, then turned back to Jeff. Well, you're just in time. Let's go. Jin stood up and left the hotel through the front doors, followed by Jeff. While Jin was busy in the human world. After Mavis finished reading Jin's letter, she didn't hesitate to pack her clothes and jump through the same window where Jin jumped after turning into her bat form. Sniff. Thankfully, I could still track his scent. Mavis sniffed in the air and sighed in relief. She was thankful to his Uncle Wayne for teaching her how to track scents and how to differentiate them. It's one of his birthday gifts for her a few years ago. She then flapped her bat wings and followed Jin's scent, which will eventually lead her out to the human world. Back to Jin's room. A few hours have passed before Jin's women entered the room. Obviously, they were confused by Jin's absence and thought that he was just somewhere around the hotel walking around, or worse, flirting with the gothic vampire again. At least that's what they assumed until they saw a folded paper on Jin's bed. What's this? Rapunzel was the first to pick it up, much to Elsa's grumble as she competed with Rapunzel on who would be able to pick the paper first. Rapunzel then proceeded to read it out loud for everyone to hear. A few seconds later, their faces were twitching in frustration while Rapunzel was the only one different. Instead of being frustrated, she was actually happy for Jin. She knows what me time means and she fully supports Jin's decision for it. She also used to like me time back when she didn't meet with Jin yet. Aside from her, Tigress and Elsa were the only ones confused about the letter, though their misunderstanding on the letter is the reason why they're frustrated. As they thought that me time is not a good thing. You guys know what me time means, right? Rapunzel asked them with slight doubt in her tone. Why does it feel like the two of them are being frustrated for no reason? Me time means he'll be alone doing what he wants, right? Elsa answered first with a slight tilt of her head while Tigress also answered soon after. It means he'll be pleasuring himself, right? What the? Elsa is kind of right, but seriously, Tigress? That's literally not what me time means. Rapunzel shook her head and said. She was right. Tigress and Elsa indeed didn't understand the meaning of the message. Me time means he'll be focusing on himself and relaxation, without worrying about his problems and issues. Relax, it's just like a vacation, but by himself instead. By himself? Then, why do I smell the scent of that vampire here? Tigress asked, referring to the gothic vampire, Mavis. That, I don't know. Rapunzel awkwardly smiled as she replied. While Jin's women were having a conversation about Jin's sudden leave, Dracula and his father, Vlad, were having a conversation on their own. What? You lied to Jin that you didn't know he appeared again. Dracula just had the biggest shock in his life as his father just revealed to him that Vlad has long known about Jin's resurface to the world. You know me, Drac. I've always been looking at him everywhere. There's no way I would miss him when he comes back. What confuses me was where he has gone off after that war. Trust me, Drac, I've searched around the world and there's no sign of him. As if he had just vanished. Until. Vlad then slowly stopped, irritating Dracula as he's already so interested in Vlad's story. Until what? Continue, Dad. Until I came across the Bible. Bible? What's that? Dracula was very confused by the word that came out of Vlad's mouth. It's some kind of storybook that most humans read, especially in churches. Vlad waved his hand away, as if telling Dracula not to focus on it too much. Anyways, where was I? Oh right, the Bible. You see, I read this Bible when I found one lying around in a human's house. My curiosity got the best of me, so I couldn't hold back and started reading the Bible. So? That's it? You just read it. Dracula felt more and more bored and on the verge of leaving the old man in front of him, who has probably gone senile due to his old age. Let me finish first, damn it. Vlad couldn't help it anymore and directly smashed his fist on Dracula's head as he shouted angrily. Ah! That hurts. Dracula rubbed his head and wanted to curse Vlad. But he's his father, what can he do? Ahem. Anyways, in this Bible, there's a man called Lucifer. Or the Bible referred to him as the devil. You know what else is interesting? I searched around a church and found one of the Pope's descriptions of this Lucifer. And guess what, Drac? What? This Lucifer might not have the same face as Jin, but his body and wings are the exact same as Jin's. They also describe the devil as a creature with long horns on their heads. Do you know where I'm getting at, Drac? That Jin is this Lucifer? Dracula answered with unsureness in his voice. He has heard from his friends about this but he didn't truly believed it. Yes. And the reason we can't find him is because it was said that the devil has a home that is very far away from Earth called Hell. Chapter 153, ch 147, Saving the Gorilla. Back to Jin, he just arrived at the zoo where Harem is being kept, following behind him is Jeff who is panting heavily. Why didn't we fly like we did yesterday? Jeff complained in a mutter. They have been running for almost an entire hour. If he was a normal civilian, he wouldn't even last 20 minutes before he passed out. Meanwhile, Jin kept running non-stop as if a pit bull was chasing his ass. Thankfully, they've finally arrived at their location, Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden, in Ohio, U.S. Only in Ohio. Jin chuckled as he remembered a funny yet annoying trend back in his world. So, what now? You said we're saving a gorilla. I didn't expect you're talking about a real gorilla, I thought you were referring to something else. Jeff chuckled and said. Why? What do you think I was referring to when I said gorilla? Jin raised his eyebrows and asked while Jeff nervously gulped his saliva in fear and replied. And nothing. Jeff stuttered and although it's quite suspicious, Jin decided to read his mind and what he read quite shocked him. Wow, that's incredibly racist of you, Jeff. Tisk tisk tisk. Jin said with a shake of his head after, making Jeff kneel down on the ground as he cries without tears. I didn't mean to think of that, the media has corroded my mind. Jeff gave a plausible reason. Jin's squinted eyes still remained on him, though he soon dropped it off as the passerby started noticing and staring at them. Let's go. Jin said before entering the zoo after fading themselves on everyone's eyes. Though that doesn't mean that they're also invisible to the zoo's camera surveillance, but do the staff really watch over the CCTV like the one shown in the movies? The answer is rarely. These surveillance cameras just record the entire happening in a single day and almost no guards on the other side watch over it 24/7. They just use it when an accident happens in the zoo and use the CCTV's recorded footage to view the happening. But for recent happenings such as now, Jin is 100% confident that no one on the other side of the surveillance cameras is watching them. Not to mention, there are hundreds upon hundreds of people around them, so they're just blending in with the background. In short terms, an extra. Never stand out, don't do anything that will make you stand out among others, and lastly but not the least, do what extras do. Being an NPC is what he means. Jin learned it while playing a game. He noticed that he mostly ignores NPCs as his thought about them is that they're just NPCs without any smart thinking. So, Jin believed that most players including him, always ignored the NPCs for their generic appearance and boring presence. Just follow my lead and try not to draw any presents. Jin whispered to Jeff, they're in the middle of a crowd full of tourists and zoo staff. Sir, yeah I mean, yes. Jeff replied in an almost salute tone similar to how soldiers reply to their drill instructors. Jin ignored him and proceeded to read one of the staff's minds to know where Harem is being kept. After getting the info, Jin didn't hesitate anymore and quickly went towards him. What's with him? How come he cares about this gorilla? Jeff slightly complained inside his mind, but he never complained out loud lest he might unleash Jin's wrath upon him. The moment they got there, Jin grinned as he stared at Harem eating some bananas while scratching his hairy leg. Looks like Harem is busy eating now. Jin tapped his finger on his chin while observing Harem. He could also see that Harem looks lonely and sad. Though such a thing wouldn't be seen by a normal human, the only reason he can see it. Suddenly, a better idea crossed Jin's thoughts. A crazy but effective idea. Let's wait for the night first. Jin whispered to himself with a grin. Night? It's so early in the morning, do we really have to wait for night time? This time, Jeff couldn't help but complain out loud, though fortunately for him, Jin just ignored his complaints. The next morning, the news shocked the entire state of Ohio. The gorilla of Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden was recently found missing this morning. Authorities and the staff of the zoo have been searching for the missing gorilla for an entire hour. What the actual fuck? We're in the news. Jeff couldn't help but curse out loud after seeing the news. To be honest, he was reluctant about yesterday, as stealing an animal doesn't bode well for him. However, after being successfully convinced by Jin, he finally gave up and helped Jin in taking away the gorilla. What he didn't expect though was to appear in the news. Well, but directly, but he was one of the people who chased the disappearance of the animal, so he still felt like he was still on the news. Similar to Jeff, Jin was also shocked, though mainly excited, as he was elated in seeing himself on the news. Sure, he used to be shown in the news back in his world as he's a small-time celebrity, but this one is different. He's not an extra in this news. He's the mysterious suspect. Watching the television, Thomas grabbed the remote and turned the TV off. His face is very grim at the moment. Harem isn't supposed to disappear. How could this be? Thomas gulped his saliva in fear and shock. This just confirms his assumption that there is indeed a reincarnator beside him and he's now in his country. Thomas was scared for his life. Everything is going against his plans. His original plan of conquering the monsters along with Mavis has gone off the roof for now. Not until he figures out who that reincarnator is. Think, Thomas, think. Thomas tapped his fingers on his table once again. Until suddenly, a crazy plan appeared on his mind. This sounds crazy, but perhaps I should go to the human world myself. No, scratch that. I'll pretend to be one of the soldiers among the army as we head off to the hotel, ready to siege them again. Once I see the reincarnator, I could go back to devise an effective plan against him. Thomas cackled to himself, thinking that this is indeed a good idea, a crazy one but good nonetheless. Now, I should prepare the army once again. Thomas excitedly stood up and pressed the button on the table, calling his army general back to his office again, all while thinking that his plan is effective and great. Unknown to him, his enemy reincarnator has long already known that he's also a reincarnator. He's 10 steps too late against Jin. Back at the hotel, Dracula and Vlad just finished reading the paper and Vlad could only laugh in delight. Ha ha ha. I didn't expect something like this to happen. Vlad spoke in the middle of laughing. What do we do now? What if the humans come back with a stronger weapon this time? What if they bought the nuke? Dracula reacted dramatically as he imagines the horror of the humans' strongest weapon, which is the nuke, at least according to what Jin told him, as he said that a single nuke is enough to decimate the entire castle including its surroundings. Jin even stated to him that the nuke can also kill him if he wasn't prepared enough. This gave enough reason for Dracula to panic over Jin's disappearance. Relax, it's not the end of the world. There's a reason why Jin left us for his me time. Tigress then seriously stared at their eyes, making them shudder before Tigress continued. It means that he trusts us enough to defend ourselves and our land. She finished. Defend? What does that mean? Wayne mysteriously appeared behind Dracula and Vlad for some unknown reason and asked a question. Knowing Jin, who can travel to different worlds, Tigress thought that Jin was doing this so the monsters won't always have to count on him, especially if he leaves this world someday. In other words, Jin is teaching the monsters how to stand up for themselves. Jin wants you all to learn how to stand on your 2 feet without asking for his help. This is a test for all of you. Tigress then proudly explained her assumption that she thinks is the most plausible reason why Jin left them on their own. A test? As expected of Lucifer. He's 100 steps ahead of us. Vlad spoke with slight fascination in his eyes. Are you implying that once the humans attack us again, we should fight them by ourselves without Jin? What if we lose or the humans are stronger than we expect them to be? Who would save us? Frankenstein also appeared beside Wayne and asked the question. Oh, for Pete's sake, can you all please stop hiding behind my back? Before Tigress could speak, Dracula spoke first while complaining before stepping aside. Showing the rest of his mischievous eavesdropping friends, Blobby, Murray, and Griffin. What? We heard the commotion downstairs, so we came up here to see what was going on. It was Griffin who explained with a good enough reason. Anyways, let's go back to Frankenstein's question. If somehow the humans overpower you, we might not look like it, but we're kind of strong. Tigress grinned, showing her large fangs that twinkled thanks to the light bulb's light. While Rapunzel twirled her frying pan on her hand before eventually resting it on her shoulder, as Elsa also did the same and made her ice magic flicker across her fingers. You can rely on us if that happens. Chapter 154, ch 148, It's the government's fault. This is the fault of the government. They should have watched over the animals in the zoo. As a matter of fact, animals should be in the wild, not zoos. An activist shouted on the street while holding a banner. Behind her are several people who are her colleagues, each also holding separate banners. This activity has caused a great disturbance on the road as vehicles and people alike are aggressively honking their horns and yelling at the activists. The police were already called and are on their way right now. It's only a matter of when they would arrive to stop the activists. Inside a cafe, Jin was watching the commotion with keen interest in his eyes. He didn't expect for things to go like this just because of kidnapping harem. While this is out of his expectations, this also confirmed some things to Jin. First is that the government still has several anti-government organizations going against it. How did he know? Simply by reading the mind of the protesters that are protesting in the streets. This protest wasn't only because of harem's kidnapping but to gather attention to themselves, for their cause of overthrowing the government. Lastly but not the least, despite being a good president by conquering several countries that are near the American soil, there are still some people who suspect that something is weird and wrong on their president. Should I meet this guy already? I feel like he would at least give entertainment to my dull life. Jin tapped his chin a few times before something weird or familiar suddenly caught his eye. A person wearing a hood that covers his entire body suddenly appeared in his vision and walked along the streets. At first, Jin would just ignore this weird person who he assumed is the infamous EMO, however when he saw how people around the person just ignored him, that's when Jin got curious and couldn't help but peek under the dim hood to see who it is using a chi technique. What he saw inside not only shocked him but his face couldn't help but curve into a large smile. He wasn't her to be here. While Jin found out the identity of the hooded person, Mavis was using her powers to make the people around to ignore her while hiding under a long hood that she found on a structure called Target. She doesn't know why it is called that and she simply thinks it's idiotic to put a target on a structure. What if someone shoots on the target? Just as Mavis shook her head to get rid of such thought, she failed to notice that a certain someone had started following her. She doesn't notice it yet as her mind was occupied with the thoughts of meeting her first humans, a real human at that. Unlike the humans that she first encountered that looks weird and moves in a very disgusting way. Mavis even doubts if what she met that day was truly humans. But since it was her father who told her about it, there's no way he would lie to her about such a thing, right? Her father knows how much she likes to meet humans. When she first met a human recently, she suddenly felt her heart throbbing. She's seeing a real human. Unfortunately, the human that she encountered yelled at her face about looking pale and calling her an EMO. Although Mavis doesn't know what it means, all she knows is that the human is insulting her. Take a deep breath, Mavis. Jin said that there is also goodness in humans. I just got unlucky this time. Mavis inhaled and exhaled before assuring herself. Unknown to her, someone was following her tracks and she failed to notice it due to being occupied in her thoughts. Before she knew it, someone suddenly grabbed her wrist and forcefully turned her around before feeling somebody's lips pressing against hers. No. Just as she wanted to resist, Mavis opened her eyes and finally managed to clearly see who dared to take her first kiss. However, her eyes widened in both surprise and excitement as she finally saw the person who stole her first kiss. Jin. Seeing that it was Jin, Mavis quickly leaped forward and attached herself on Jin's body like a koala before taking back his lips with hers. Jin was surprised by this reaction. At first, he was only intending to surprise her with a kiss while at the same time, assessing what her reaction would be if he made the first move. Normally, his expectation of what would happen next is either Mavis would snarl and fight back or recognize him and shy away in embarrassment, according to what he observed about her personality. Snapping out of his thoughts, Jin quickly pushed Mavis away from him. As much as he wants to enjoy her small but cute tongue, they're in the public and the moment Jin distracted Mavis by surprising her with a kiss, the mind power that she placed on herself to be ignored by the humans was broken and now they're looking at them with either disgust or jealousy. Jin could understand the jealousy, however he was confused about the disgust. Are they looking down on him or at Mavis? Both of them are good looking, right? Unknown to Jin, this year is the era where emo is slowly being forgotten and abandoned by teens and such. So in their eyes, Mavis is a gothic emo albeit a beautiful one. But would Jin care about that even if he knows? Hell no, obviously. Why would a tiger care about the opinion of an ant? Unless that ant is as big as a mountain. Let's continue this somewhere else. Jin whispered to Mavis after seeing the confusion and pain in her eyes. She probably thought that Jin didn't like what she just did. I am sorry. Mavis gulped her saliva in fear and quickly apologized to Jin before it was too late. Hey? What are you apologizing for? Jin raised his eyebrow in confusion and asked Mavis. This response from Jin also made Mavis halt her tears and got confused. And just like that, the two of them just got confused with each other. Oh. Mavis finally had a look of realization dawning over her face. After Jin brought Mavis back to his hotel room, he quickly asked her why she was apologizing and after having a short conversation where they cleared their confusions, Mavis finally sighed in relief. Relieved that Jin wasn't mad at her for what she did. What are you doing here? No, scratch that, how did you find me? Jin shook his head and asked another question. I followed your scent. After Mavis answered, her head was then raised high as if she was expecting some kind of praise coming from Jin. Unfortunately for her, Jin just deadpan stared at her before sighing. Look, I don't think you're safe here, you should probably go back to the hotel. Jin's head shook and he strictly said to Mavis. But why? But you said that not all humans are bad, right? They're just like us, there's good and bad. That's why I'm here. Mavis replied with resolution in her eyes. Although that's not a good enough reason, but since you're already here, what else can I do? Jin rubbed his temples and said with defeat in his tone. He might as well use this chance to develop their relationship to another level. He already has Dracula and Martha's recognition, what else can be the reason for him to hesitate to take a step forward in their relationship? Tigress and his women? Well, they kind of agreed to him having several other women as long as they were informed about the new woman. Yes. Mavis made a victory expression mixed with delight, showing how excited she is. So, what's our mission? We're infiltrating, right? Mavis tapped her toes on the ground in excitement, clearly wanting to have something to do. Mission? I'm not here on a mission. I'm actually just here to have fun and relax, and since you're already here, you might as well join me in my next destination. Jin patted Mavis's shoulder while showing an apologetic expression. So no mission? Mavis asked for confirmation, and after getting Jin's nod, she continued. How are we supposed to relax then? The humans are going on a war with us, right? Shouldn't we do something to prevent it at all costs? Mavis pouted. It is but a mere insignificant war, my little bat. Jin couldn't resist the urge and his hand moved on its own as it found itself on top of Mavis's head, patting it like she was a child. Erg, you remind me of Dad. He's always messing up my hair like that when I was a child. Although Mavis was complaining, there is an inexplicable smile on her face, showing her love for her father. It's not messing with the hair, maybe. It's called patting. Jin explained. What's patting? It's what I did just now. That's called patting. Really? Why do you even want to pat my head? Shouldn't you only do that to your baby? Mavis said in confusion. She has read several old literatures made by humans and she knows that such an act should only be done to babies. That's right, my baby. Jin said with a teasing smile on his face. Mavis, who was late to realize, finally realized what Jin meant by his words, and she quickly blushed, so she immediately changed the subject. Anyways, what is it you said about relaxing? How are we gonna relax? Mavis looked anywhere but Jin's eyes as she spoke. Although Jin wanted to tease her more but decided against it. Have you ever tried playing video games? Jin said with a smirk on his face. Video gems. Mavis tilted her head and mispronounced the word. It's video game, never mind, I'll teach it to you later, anyways. Are you interested? Chapter 155, ch 149, Games. Inside a bright arcade store full of neon lights and such, Jin and Mavis walked inside. Since it's currently nighttime, there's no need for Mavis to hide herself under her long hood. So everyone was welcome to see her pale beauty from close. What is this place? My eyes hurt. Mavis quickly covered her eyes as despite being only a fluorescent light made by humans, her eyes are still sensitive to anything very bright. Which is the reason why mostly candles are being used on the castle, as vampires and some monsters are sensitive to bright light. Even Dracula himself is no exception to this. Though his resistance to bright lights are obviously much stronger than Mavis's. Just squint your eyes and it'll slowly adapt. Jin reminded her. Mavis did as he told her and squinted her eyes. Seeing her do that, Jin smiled and grabbed her hand before leading her to the arcade machines. All in the meantime, parents and children alike are staring in their direction. Old people were shaking their heads while muttering the word youth. Meanwhile, the children were looking at their prize toy and Mavis back and forth before huffing and stomping their way away from Mavis and Jin. They clearly discovered that there's something much better than their toys. Feeling smug, Jin removed his hand from Mavis's and before she got confused, he suddenly grabbed her shoulder and pulled her close to him, their bodies sticking to each other. Were so close to each other. Mavis madly blushed as she could feel the warmth of Jin's body. The first thing that they tried is the basketball hoop machine, since they're here to have fun. Jin would obviously avoid the obvious rigged arcade machines such as the crane machines. Here. You just throw this ball inside that hoop and we'll gain a score, you get it. After giving Mavis instructions and teaching her the proper posture of shooting, Mavis nodded her head before inserting the coin inside the machine. Soon, the Spalding brand basketball balls rolled towards them and Jin took the initiative to grab one and shoot it to the hoop. Fwussy. Did Jin fail? No, he did not. One thing that you should take note of when it comes to playing in an arcade with your date is to show off your skills. Success is a must. So, the Spalding ball went inside the hoop and Mavis clapped her hand in cheer. Stop clapping, maybe. Grab one and shoot two. Jin chuckled at her reaction and grabbed one of the Spalding balls and passed it to her. Mavis nervously held the ball while looking back and forth at the hoop and the ball in her hand. She's clearly afraid of showing failure in front of Jin. She doesn't want to embarrass herself. Not to mention, there are some curious kids and staff looking in their way. Mavis gulped her saliva and imitated Jin's earlier shooting posture and threw the ball forward. Fwoosh! Unfortunately, Mavis isn't a normal human, so her strength isn't suited for this kind of game. And so, she threw the ball too hard and fast. Seeing this, the kids behind her chuckled while the staff shook their heads, expecting Mavis to fail. She's a girl, what did I expect? They all said inside their minds in unison. However, would Jin allow Mavis to be embarrassed like that? Not to mention, he heard and chuckles behind them, so Jin quickly used his telekinesis to guide the ball towards the hoop, and in order to not show suspicion, Jin manipulated the ball to slam on the rim for a few times before rolling around the inner rim and went inside smoothly. All of this happened under the shocked gazes of everyone who was watching them. Even Mavis, who was ready to face the embarrassment, didn't expect for the ball to go in despite the strong force that she used to shoot. Out of all of them, Jin was the only one who had a grin on his face. Thankfully, none of them noticed something wrong. I manipulated it enough to be believable. Jin said to himself with a proud expression. While Jin was being proud of himself, Mavis was jumping up and down before engulfing Jin in a bear hug. I did it! She excitedly shouted while looking at Jin's face, wanting to see his reaction to her win. Seeing the smile on Jin's face made Mavis silently squeal inside her mind. He's proud of me. Mavis whispered to herself inside her mind while Jin was smiling because he was able to fool everyone in the arcade. Time is ticking, Mavis. Let's continue. Be careful with your shoot this time. Be a bit softer. Control your strength. Jin reminded Mavis with advice this time. Meanwhile, Mavis nodded her head and they continued their game. Much to Mavis's surprise, she managed to shoot all of her shots perfectly, without any mistakes thanks to a certain cheater. Making her happy. Fortunately, her eyes have already adapted from the bright lights, so she was able to see the entire arcade in its full glory. It's so colorful. Mavis muttered with a twinkle in her eyes. Jin, who was beside her, can't help but smile at her reaction. Let's play more arcades. Jin softly held Mavis's hand and led her throughout the entire arcade games available in the arcade establishment. Obviously, Jin purposely avoided the crank machines and such. There's no way he's gonna let Mavis experience the horror of that rigged machine. Sure, he could use his power to unrig the machine. But that's cheating, right? So, Jin abandoned those thoughts and enjoyed the day with Mavis. Gurgle. While playing a Street Fighter arcade game, Jin's sharp hearing caught the sound of Mavis's stomach gurgling in hunger. Looking at her, Mavis was biting her lip as she looked down, her cheeks were flushed and red due to the sheer embarrassment. What do you want to eat? Jin chuckled at her face, and as much as he wanted to tease her, food is more important, so he asked her instead. Anything is fine. As long as it's made by humans. Despite being embarrassed, Mavis is still determined to fulfill the bucket list that she made before coming here. And one of those is tasting the food made by humans. Do you want the American way or the Asian way? Hey? What's the difference? Mavis doesn't have any knowledge about the terms that Jin used, so she was confused about what he said. Just choose one and you'll see. Jin mysteriously smiled and replied. The American way. After a moment of hesitation and thinking to herself, Mavis finally chose the first one, the American way. Welp, pizza it is then. Jin answered quickly before spreading his senses throughout the entire city of Columbus, Ohio. It didn't take long before he saw the nearest pizza restaurant. I should probably go and buy myself a car. Jin looked at the surroundings and saw several cars that passed by them on the road. Have you found the ruins of Atlantis? Thomas was sitting in front of Abraham Van Helsing as he asked. Not yet, but I'm close. I could have found it earlier if it wasn't for your incompetent experts as you like to call them. Abraham sneered and replied, completely disregarding Thomas's status as the President of the United States of America. However, instead of getting angry at the disrespect, Thomas smiled instead and replied, I see. I'll pass this message to them and give them a warning. Hopefully, we'll find that artifact in time. Thomas then continued. Why do you even want this artifact to kill Dracula? Do you have any grudges with him? Abraham, who has lived for the past 100 years in this world, to the point of integrating his own body to a machine just to continue to live, was confused that Thomas shares the same grudge as he has to Dracula. It's confidential. Just do your job and I promise that you'll be able to kill Dracula with your own hands. Thomas's face grew cold as he said. Although deep down, he was afraid and cautious. Now that there's an unknown variable out there that might threaten his existence, his uniqueness in this world is stolen. Now, he must do everything he can to get that back, even if it means killing his way through it. Fine, keep your secrets. Just make sure that Dracula will die by my hands. The old man clicked his tongue and said before shouting for someone behind him. Erica. Let's go. Abraham then turned around and left. One of the downsides of having a machine body is mobility. Yes, Dad. Erica, who has been standing behind him, replied and followed him out. Thomas didn't move an inch and simply watched their backs leaving his office. Though there was an inexplicable lust flashing before his eyes as he stares at Erica's back. Unfortunately, that old man has invented something that prevents me from controlling their minds. From what I know, in the movie Johnny managed to resist Dracula's mind powers with contact lenses. So, they probably wear that too. Thomas sighed and said to himself in defeat. And so, Thomas could do nothing but wait for the old man finish his job of killing Dracula. And once he got his use of him, he could just use force against him and take his daughter away. Those curves are killing me. Thomas licked his lips as he thought about Erica. Unknown to him, Abraham has long seen the lust in his eyes the moment they entered his office. Chapter 156, ch 150, The Inevitable Face-Off. It's my exams tomorrow. Wish me luck, lol. Dash underscore 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 underscore. As the two of them were having fun, Jin was unaware about one of Thomas's plans. Which is to control the Kraken to kill Dracula and the entire monster society. And with how everything is finally going to his plan, it is now his job to initiate on having the bait. Which is to kidnap Mavis and use her to bait Dracula and the monsters to Atlantis, the place where he's going to control the Kraken to kill them and hopefully, so is the reincarnator. His plan of the night saving the damsel in distress method to catch the zing with Mavis is already thrown out of the window the moment he speculates that there's another reincarnator beside him. What's more bad is that this reincarnator might have already taken Mavis. Second hand is good enough. Once I get my use on her, I'll just throw her aside. Thomas's thoughts were clearly similar to most fanfic protagonists that only wanted their harem to be virgin in almost everything. It's quite idiotic and almost impossible to take a woman's firsts such as first kiss, first sex, and the other else. In today's society, you can only find such women in Asian countries. As for American women, a high school teen might not even go past age 16 before her virginity is taken by some high school jock. Just like what a certain rapper used to say. If you want to find true love, then find an ugly person and love them with all of your heart. A/N, I'm referring to my country's famous rapper, a Filipino rapper to be exact, so most of you won't get it. This is so good. After taking her first bite of the pepperoni pizza. Obviously, Jin requested for the garlic to be removed in the mix. Jin is not sure if garlic can truly hurt vampires since Dracula mentioned in the movie that garlic just irritates him. But Jin still insisted on removing the garlic to ensure that Mavis would fully enjoy the pepperoni pizza. And from the looks of her face, Jin would proudly assume that Mavis is more than just enjoying it. She even has an almost fanatical look in her eyes as she stares at the large slice of pizza in her hand. As if she considers the pizza as the king of tasty foods. There are many more foods that are more delicious than pizza. Jin whispered to her. He doesn't want Mavis to end up worshipping pizzas as the most delicious food in the world. Pizza is quite bad for our body if it is digested too much. More delicious than pizza. At this moment, drool started to come out of Mavis's lips as she imagines herself being drowned by delicious but unknown foods made by humans. If I was a human and I know who she is, I'd definitely use the delicious foods as a blackmailing material against her. Jin chuckled to himself while at the same time, he raised his guard against those who might try to seek harm to Mavis. Seeing how easy it is to conquer her by simply giving her food is quite a bad sign. Is he making this into a big thing? No, he's just cautious like he is. Jin, take me to these delicious foods. I want to try them. Mavis grabbed Jin's collar and shook him several times as she fantasized about the delicious foods. All right, let's go. Jin spoke amidst the shakes and rolled his eyes. While Jin and Mavis were busy in the human world, a large army has finally been arranged to invade the monster territory. This time, instead of keeping them in the dark, they're informed of who their enemy is and their weaknesses according to their knowledge, or in other words, literature about the monsters. At first, the soldiers were skeptical and even some laughed about the information, but after seeing the serious looks of their general and president, they finally decided to take it seriously. Albeit a little, as a small part of them still denies their claim of their enemy being the monsters that are written in fiction. Instead of going to the usual secret entrance, which obviously they assumed to have been traps all over again, they decided to take a front approach this time. They're going to devastate their way through the original traps that Dracula laid in the original movie, such as hidden paths, secret passages, and illusions to make the hotel appear uninhabited after passing through a certain passage. This might work to normal humans, however, Thomas would join them this time and use the humans as a distraction so he could sneak in and kidnap Mavis. Once he did that, he would use her as a bait and maybe have fun with her at the same time. Thinking that his plan is very great, Thomas can't wait to implement it right now. Back to the castle, rings started to alarm on the witches' minds. Since they're the ones capable of learning chi and how to sense them, Jin has also connected their minds to the traps that are laid all around the open, hidden, dangerous and the secret entrances. So the moment these alarms start to ring on their heads, they quickly realize that the traps are activated. Which means that the humans are invading them once again. Sound the alarm! One of the witches squealed in an ordering tone as she picked up a broom and flew outside their base, following her with several other witches. A gremlin repeatedly nodded his head in fear before pulling the lever by his side, sounding the alarms throughout the entire castle, alerting everyone inside. Inside the castle, in a certain room that has been transformed into a war meeting room, Dracula, Vlad, Frankenstein, Murray, Wayne, Griffin, and Blob, all gathered together as they stared at the large map of the entire Earth. I can't believe we're just seeing this now. Just how many humans are there outside? They've taken the entire world. Murray can't help but gasp after Vlad showed them the world map that he got from one of the human places called New York. Although it's quite a bit of an exaggeration that the humans have taken over the whole world, since technically humans haven't even discovered 80% of the ocean, however from his perspective, this kind of feat is already akin to conquering the whole world. And that's our problem here. From what you guys told me and the chopper that Jin brought back, our attackers this time are the United States of America. A super county that almost everyone fears. After this new president took office, it only took him several years to amass incredible wealth and use several strategies to successfully conquer nearby countries. Vlad took his cue and smoothly explained according to his own knowledge. So what you're saying is that only one kingdom is attacking us? Dracula also gasped in shock after. It's called a country. The term kingdom is rarely used by humans in this current era, and yes, only one country is attacking us. Now imagine if it is the entire world, against us. After Vlad said those words, the people in the room went silent and contemplated this matter. They imagined thousands upon thousands of the same metallic monster attacking them, not to mention, about their other weapons that Jin talked about. That's why, peace was never an option the moment we're exposed. I'm sorry to say this, but, unless we take the initiative to control the leaders of these countries, then perhaps we would achieve peace, but only temporarily, because by using that method, the peace would be unstable. Vlad explained thoroughly while looking at Dracula's face. His son, Dracula, was the only one who tried to seek peace with the humans, since he felt that the war between two sides is unnecessary. However, who is Vlad? He has been staying with the humans, watching and observing them. Which is why he knows that the peace that Dracula is seeking is not the best option for them. So what do you suggest then? Dracula, who has been quiet for the long time, finally spoke. I think it would be best if we take the initiative to attack them this time. Just like what we used to do back then. Vlad showed his still sharp fangs to display that he's not idle, and instead, he's still honing his vampiric powers. Hearing his plan and seeing his display of power, they were all shocked about Vlad's plan. Before they could respond to his suggestion and further their discussions, the alarm in the meeting room suddenly rang, alerting them all. Knowing what the alarm means, they all quickly reacted. Humans are at it again. Wayne snarled and said. During these days, he has been honing his beastly instincts again. Even though he's not yet at his prime, at least he's not that weak again like he is a few days earlier before meeting Jin. Constant peace is truly a nightmare to monsters like him who are the predators of the wild. Their instincts are getting rusty as time goes on. Let's adjourn this meeting. We must respond to the attack. Having been informed of what happened in the hotel a few weeks earlier when he's still not here, Vlad also responded alongside them. Dracula was the first one to get out of the meeting room and was met with the worried gazes of the monsters around them. What's going on, Drac? Are we being attacked again? I want this to be over now. Seeing the worried and scared looks of his fellow monsters, Dracula felt a heartache before memories of the old war flashed in his mind. Back then, humans would be the ones that are supposed to be scared of them. How come the tables have turned? Is it really because of him? Perhaps, Jin was right. The only way to end this war is to make the humans fear them again like they should be back then. And just like that, the remaining chains that shackle Dracula's heart from going back to war with humans finally snapped and broke. Chapter 157, ch 151, The Third Wave of Invasion. In a certain cemetery, the place that Dracula built as the first trap for humans who tried to find the hotel, countless tanks and army trucks were running through the zombies and gravestones, disregarding everything. I can't believe it. One of the soldiers in a truck muttered with shock in his tone. He was also one of the soldiers who doubted the president's words about their enemy. But now, seeing the rotting corpses that can stand and growl like a hungry animal, he's finally slowly starting to believe his words. The same can be said to the others, they were also looking at the zombies with interest and fear. They watched zombie movies and know that a single bite of a zombie is enough to kill them unless they take preposterous measures such as cutting off the part where the zombie has bitten or killing oneself to not inflict harm to the others. So, they stayed cautious and watched all sides, at the same time, closing their mouths since the trucks were smashing through the waves of zombies, causing their bloods and smashed organs to splatter all over them. Meanwhile, they only brought 3 choppers this time instead of more. Thomas was cautious about the traps that the previous unit reported to him. And he should be at the moment the choppers reach a certain distance in the air, a familiar but unfamiliar bright suddenly appeared in front of everyone's vision. Unfortunately, humans are smarter than that, they won't fall for the same trick twice. Which is why all of them are wearing advanced goggles that could block out the flash. So the moment the flash appeared, only the zombies were affected and got flashed on their faces. Fortunately, most zombies don't have eyes and mostly rely on their hearing and sense of smell. So they only heard the flash. As for the humans, they successfully blocked the flash. Inside one of the random tricks, Thomas, who was in disguise, smirked in victory. You think humans would fall for the same trick, hey? Just as he said that in victory inside his mind, they suddenly noticed how the dust and dead leaves started to fly up in the air and vibrate slightly. Before they could react, a pain-streaking sound suddenly washes over their ears, causing all of them to drop whatever they are holding and hold their ears in pain. Blood even started to seep through the gaps of their fingers as they all shouted in pain. As for the pilots, thankfully they're wearing headsets that are connected to their comms, so although the sound is too much even for them, the headset at least provided them a muffled sound of the pain-streaking blare. Aside from them, others weren't lucky, especially Thomas whose ears are much more sensitive than humans, so he received the pain twice as much as the others. Gaig. I can't hear anything. Help. Fortunately for them, the trap is only made of chi and its supply of chi wasn't that much, so a few minutes have passed before the harsh blare finally subsided. However, this can't be called good news as many soldiers passed out while the choppers all landed on the ground with not so much damage, but the damage is still there. Meanwhile, the trucks all accidentally collided with several dead trees. Thankfully they're just dead trees, so there was only some big dents on the front of the truck, but the engine was fine. After the sound subsided, the remnants of it were still ringing in everyone's ears. Fortunately for them, they weren't the only victims of this blare, as the zombies were in a much worse state than them. Their heads all popped like a watermelon, making the cemetery look like hell due to the bloods and brain matters. After resting for a bit and recovering their lost hearing, they all boarded their vehicles again and resumed their journey towards the hotel. Albeit this time, they're more than just cautious, they upped their guard up to the point that a small movement would cause all of them to point their weapons at it. Thomas also got cautious and scared, so he used his authority to use the satellite to order NASA to watch over their movements. However, after receiving a reply that the satellite can't detect any life in their current area, including theirs, it scared Thomas a bit. Which only means that whoever this reincarnator is, knows about their capability to watch from the sky like a bird. What did I expect? Of course he knows about the satellites, he knows about harem, for God's sake. Thomas resisted the urge to slap his forehead very hard. After smashing their way through the cemetery, it's finally time for the next trap. However, there was a problem. It's a cave. Thomas muttered to himself while staring at the entrance of the cave. Although the entrance is big enough for their trucks to go in, the inside is very tight and their choppers can't go inside. Now, either they try to find another way or they go through the cave. Through the cave. Thomas then transmitted this suggestion and influenced the general in charge of the mission. We're going through the cave. After being hit like a sense of loss of control, the general regained his bearing and loudly announced to the army. The general then proceeded to ignore the groans and silent complaints of the soldiers below and entered his army truck. What about the choppers, sir? A soldier stood by his window and saluted before asking. Just leave it all here and leave a single platoon to stay guard. This is a very dangerous place, no one would be brave enough to steal them. The general confidently said. Although he has also read the report of the previous unit about their choppers being taken away for some unknown reason, he believed that the reason why it was stolen was because it was left in the open with no guards, so this time, he'll leave some soldiers to guard the choppers. Yes, sir. The soldier then left to pass the order to the others. After a few minutes of preparing and deciding which platoon would stay, everyone else finally boarded their trucks, including the pilots of the choppers. Let's go. After slapping the outdoor of the truck, the vehicles finally started moving and entered the large cave. Obviously, the headlights of the trucks are open so they would have vision inside. And just like that, 20 large military trucks entered the cave with each soldier having a bad premonition in their hearts. Why does it feel like we're all being brought to our deaths? They all said to themselves in unison while Thomas was the only one having different thoughts than them. Mavis, I'm coming for you. While Thomas and his friends entered through their trap, the witches, riding on their brooms, had finally arrived at the cemetery, and after seeing the destruction that the humans have caused, they all can't help but shudder in fear while at the same time, they were angry at them. Zombies were one of their creations back in the day. They were created due to a certain witch that wanted to revive her dead child. However, instead of fully resurrecting her child, it turned into a monstrosity called zombie instead. Those humans. The witches gritted their teeth in anger before using their magic to track them. Oh! Good luck on them for surviving that. However, after knowing where the humans are, they all stopped and a smirk raised on their lips. They're confident that the cave that they entered is enough to eradicate them all, and if they're lucky, maybe only a few of them would survive. After all, that cave is one of the scariest caves created jointly by Dracula and some of his monster friends. The cave has many names, but it is mostly known as the Arachnid Abyss. Why did he have to sacrifice himself like that? Two of them could obviously fit on top of that. Back to Jin and Mavis, they were watching a movie called Titanic from Netflix. After finishing the movie with Jack sacrificing himself for Rose, Mavis's face was full of tears as she kept denying to herself that Jack could have survived if Rose could just scoop in and give space for Jack to climb in. Remove her vampiric powers, she's like a human teenager. Jin looked at Mavis's teary-eyed face and muttered to himself. Mavis, trust me. Jack couldn't climb in with Rose because the wood would lose balance and the both of them would fall off on the cold sea instead. Seeing the grief on Mavis's face as if the person who died was her family, Jin wanted to laugh out loud before holding it in as to not anger her and calmly explain to her the reason why Jack couldn't save himself. And I forgot to tell you that this movie is based on a true event. Jin then continued, unknowingly adding salt to an open injury. Are real events. If only Dad would let me go to the human world much earlier, I could have saved them. Aggressively wiping off the tears on her face, Mavis's womanly instinct was to put the blame on someone, and who else would she blame but her father who isn't here? Poor Drac. Jin silently prayed inside his mind before feeling some weird feeling that his entire body was on fire before disappearing. What the? Jin couldn't help but mutter to himself in confusion. Chapter 158, ch 152, The Third Wave of Invasion 2. Help. Fuck. Shoot them all quick. Seeing the chaos that has ensued once they went deeper into the cave, Thomas was flabbergasted and wanted to know what went wrong. A few minutes before the happenings, everything was just going fine. The ride was smooth except for a few bumps on the ground and some cobwebs on the front. Some soldiers took this time to relax for a bit as they felt that the cave was just a path towards their next destination. However, everything went haywire the moment they encountered several small spiders. At first, there weren't any problems as the spiders were just small and the trucks just killed them all with the tires. That was until more spiders started to crawl out of the ceiling and walls, while the spiders started to get larger and larger. To the point that they have to start shooting at the spiders that are as large as a BMX bike. And now more spiders with larger builds started to crawl out and they have no choice but to speed up, crashing through the waves of spiders. Earlier they were just going slow because they were still cautious about the unknown path ahead, however now that they're almost about to be surrounded by the spiders, they were left with no choice but to leave their lives to fate and proceed with the unknown path forward without knowing what lies ahead. Splash! Splatter! Bloods and flesh of spiders all flew everywhere while everyone was nervously breathing heavily. Some take out their Bibles and pray to God. However, it didn't last long before a larger spider with the same size of a car came into view in front of the first truck and collided against it. Bam! Due to the gravity and speed of the mass, the truck was swayed on the side and accidentally crashed into the wall. The truck behind stopped at the sight of it and so are the rest of the trucks. The soldiers inside the first truck quickly ran out, shooting all the spiders that came on their way. Bam! Help! However, they were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer number of the spiders along with their almost impossible sizes. The rest of the soldiers tried to help by any means necessary, however with so many spiders crawling everywhere, their help was very limited to shooting at the spiders with little to no effort because of their numbers. It's like if they shoot one spider, two more shall appear. Like a certain organization/mythical creature. Abandon them. Just swerve the trucks and speed up. The general in charge's lips quivered before making a final decision and announced it loudly, much to everyone's shock. Even Thomas was surprised by the bold decision of the general. He hasn't even influenced him into making the decision yet. However, he could understand the general's decision. After all, would you save a single person or a million people? In this current situation, the general decided to save the majority while leaving the minority. This is from the greater good, after all. Although the drivers of the trucks were hesitant, but seeing the increasing worst situation, they gritted their teeth and slammed their feet on the pedal. Vroom! The exhaust fumes went crazy as the trucks swiftly evaded the poor soldiers who all looked sad and shocked at being abandoned. Seeing the trucks leave, as much as they want to shout at the curse, however it's already too late, and even if it isn't, it's useless. They're on their own right now and seeing their situation, they won't last very long. Oh God! Please help us! They all dropped their guns and kneeled on the ground as tears dropped from their eyes, rolling on their cheeks. Only in the time of despair would they remember about their God and to ask for his help. Just as the spiders started to get close to them, and so was their despair, they suddenly saw that the spiders stopped in their tracks. Looking around while wiping their tears, they saw that the spiders started to walk away from them while their fallen comrades turned out to be asleep instead of dead like they assumed earlier, since the spiders were biting them with their fangs. Thud! X20. They heard several heavy footsteps ringing behind them. The footsteps were in order to properly if this being has more than 2 legs. Slowly turning around, color quickly drained from their faces as another spider came crawling to them. However, it is too pathetic to call this a spider. Gee, God helps us all. One of them even found a strength to mutter under his breath as everyone stared at the enormous spider in front of them. This is the largest spider they have ever seen, even larger than a tank. The 8 eyes of the spider gives them the chill as it stares right at their souls. Dracula was right. Humans would indeed have the audacity to disturb the peaceful life of the monsters. If only he didn't get scared of the humans' ability to reproduce like rabbits and their incredible intelligence, not to mention the adaptability, perhaps monsters wouldn't have to hide from you humans. Much to their surprise, the spider suddenly spoke in their language. How did a spider even know how to speak English? Did the spider take some English classes without anyone knowing? Unfortunately, they didn't manage to understand what the spider said as their minds were still occupied with their fear towards the large spider and the shock of its ability to speak in their own language. Why are you humans suddenly gone quiet? Is something wrong? I don't look scary, am I? I just trimmed my hairs early this morning. The large spider asked in confusion while staring at the humans with her 8 eyes. Still quiet? Fine then. Keep your mouths to yourselves, I'll just do my job. The large spider used 2 of her 8 limbs to shrug her shoulders before continuing. Now sleep. In front of their eyes, they could see how the large spider opened her mouth and purple gas started to come out, surrounding all of them, including the fallen ones. Soon after they took a slight breath of the gas, dizziness quickly came over them, and before they knew it, they lost control of their bodies and their visions went dark. Only God knows what would happen to them next. Back to Thomas, he stared at the distance where they left the soldiers, and the last thing he saw with his enhanced eyesight was a very large spider greeting them before the darkness of the cave consumed, rendering Thomas blind from seeing what would happen to them. They're already dead, was the last thing Thomas said about them before shifting his focus on another. Hey, do you think we'll encounter more of those spiders? Suddenly, a nervous voice of a fellow soldier spoke beside him. Turning his head to the man, Thomas could see how nervous the man was and curtly replied. Of course I don't know. If you ask me about it one more time I'll throw you out of the truck, he said before turning his head back away from the nervous soldier. You're rude. After a few minutes of driving, thankfully they encountered less and less spiders before they disappeared as if they weren't in the cave in the first place. The thing is, this is good news for the soldiers and they could finally sigh in relief. However, for Thomas, he knew that this is just the beginning. And a few minutes later he was right. They successfully got out of the damp and dark cave, but in return, the sunlight that they were expecting to shine over was nowhere to be seen. Instead, they were greeted with a dark spooky forest that is covered in fog. Or in other words, the haunted forest. This time, they couldn't truly take the trucks because of the large and tall trees. They could only proceed on foot. Awoo! Hearing a howl in the distance didn't help them to relax, instead, it just added to their current fear. Why are we even on this mission? One of them muttered in fear. Shut it. They're just monsters. We're stronger, we're better. We have the weapons they don't have. Another brave soldier stood up and tried to cheer them up. However, the next soldier's rebut made him sit back down. But they have abilities we don't have. Before they could continue arguing, the truck driver, who got out of his driver's seat, slammed his palm on the back door and shouted. What are you guys still doing there? Come out now, quick! After receiving the order, the 2 soldiers glared at each other for the last time before opening the door, and they all came out one by one. Meanwhile, Thomas rolled his eyes and sneered inside his mind. Tisk, humans. Chapter 159, ch 153, The Third Wave of Invasion 3. The time is coming. Closing his eyes, God muttered to himself as he just recently watched Jin inside the world of Hotel Transylvania. The god of this world surely wanted to get rid of him, hey? It seems like he doesn't want him to rise again. 2 beings were beside him this time. The other is the familiar Callias who just spoke, while the other is surprisingly the mother of a certain long-haired heroine. I'm afraid if this god wanted to get rid of him, Jin would need more than just his own strength to survive. Rapunzel's mother, Illyria, the goddess of life and the eternal nurturer. He has your blessing and also mine, I'm sure he'll survive. Callias shrugged his shoulders and said, without much worry in his tone, unlike Illyria's. Your blessing? You're the god of wine and alcohol, what kind of blessing can you give him? Illyria teased while covering her mouth with her loose robe. Hey! At least I gave my blessing. And besides, it's not like he needs our blessings. It would just be a temporary boost for someone like him. Callias retorted with a shy expression. He can't just admit that his blessing on Jin is alcohol immunity, right? Calm down, you two, Jin will be fine. It's just a matter of whether he's ready to take back his responsibilities after this. God pacified them both and said, making Callias react and reply. So you're really bringing him back, hey? Those devils will surely become more arrogant after this. But the angels became the same, right? After Lucifer mysteriously died, they became arrogant and felt like they were the strongest race in the entire multiverse. Contrary to what they're depicted as. Illyria scoffed and said with a curtly tone. From the hate on her voice, you can tell that she isn't fond of the angels. Are you saying that Lucifer's return would be good? Callias raised his eyebrows and said. No, what I'm saying is that Lucifer's return would bring balance to the multiverse again. Look what happened to the other gods. They can't stomach the angels' arrogance and they decide to build an alliance to erase their existence from the multiverse. Illyria calmly replied. And the devils? I heard they went quiet after Lucifer's death. Callias asked too, while providing his own information according to what he knows as of now. I never heard from them either. They've been really quiet this time. Ilaria shook her head and replied. All right you two, quiet down. God raised his hand and said. The two followed what he said like a pet and closed their mouths before continuing their observation on Jin. Back to Jin, he and Mavis were at a convenience store buying some snacks for their next journey. However, Mavis's expression once they got in the convenience store was akin to a child discovering something amazing and cool. Look Jin. They have this drink called Slurpee. Why slurp? Mavis showed the bottle to Jin before slurping on its straw. Fwaha. And they come in different flavors. Let's try them all. Mavis excitedly filled the cup with a different flavor and slurped on its straw before trying another flavor and filling it again with a different flavor. This continued for several seconds before Mavis was finally satisfied after trying different kinds of flavor and even accidentally filling it with a flavor that she has already consumed. I'll pay for it all. Jin looked at the cashier and saw her twitching face. Jin slightly chuckled and said before taking out his wallet and dropping multiple $100 on the counter. Keep the change. Since Jin won't stay in this world for too long, Jin doesn't care about money anymore. With his powers, he can have as much money as he wants. Seeing the $100 bills on the counter, the cashier's eyes lit up before taking a few to her pocket while the rest were sent to the cash register. Jin noticed this and didn't say anything. He just waited for Mavis to finish what she wanted to do before they could proceed with their next vacation plan. At least, that's what is supposed to happen when his senses suddenly rang, alerting him of a certain signal that he placed on his women just in case something bad happens to them or they call out to his name either by voice or by mental. What the fuck happened? Veins popped out of Jin's forehead as he muttered with a grit of his teeth. Even the cashier, who was in heaven due to the large tip she got, suddenly shuddered in fear as she felt like she could see Jin's scary aura emanating from his body. Meanwhile, Mavis was so busy eating ice cream that she wasn't paying attention to Jin's sudden shift of mood. Who dares to touch them? A few minutes earlier in the monster world, the soldiers all sighed in relief after getting out of the haunted forest without casualties. Perhaps there weren't any traps in it either because they coincidentally avoided them considering how large the forest is, or they're confident that humans wouldn't bypass the forest. The haunted forest was just thankfully a forest with ghosts that scares them and instills fear on them. Although some of them got scared and pissed their pants, aside from that, they successfully got out. And now, they're under a bridge. The bridge that leads towards the gates of a tall wall. There isn't supposed to be a wall in here. That fucking reincarnator is ruining everything. Thomas clenched his fists as he looked up at the tall wall with fury expression. All right everyone. We'll sepe dot. Just as the general in charge was about to give an order, Thomas has already glimpsed the hidden tunnel underneath the bridge. He's not sure where it leads to as his X-ray vision is limited, but he's confident that wherever it leads, it is somewhere around the castle inside. So he quickly influenced a suggestion to the general that the army would be halved, the other will barrage through the main entrance while a smaller half would sneak in through the tunnel underneath. And that other half is his unit. The general's eyes lost focus for a second before it went back to normal, however the same can't be said to his order. All right, here's the plan everyone. After giving out the plan and sorting out some complaints, it was time to proceed. And Thomas was the one assigned to lead his unit. As for his unit? Of course, his unit consists of him and his vampiric servants. His entire unit is composed of 100 of his vampiric servants. Meaning, he brought his entire vampire army this time. He's cautious about the monsters, especially after experiencing the sheer gap between him and Vlad. Let's go in. After sending them the image of Mavis according to what he watched in the movie, they proceeded with their mission. Kidnapping Mavis. Unknown to them, their target is enjoying herself in the human world along with her boyfriend, or who she considers a boyfriend since she thought that Jin was taking her out on a date. Though even if Jin knew about it, who is he to refuse it? As a man, he would even accept it wholeheartedly. After they found the entrance of the secret tunnel, Thomas first let 5 of his vampiric men enter. And thankfully for him this time, he trusted his instincts. The moment the 5 men entered with their feet, they were suddenly greeted with several arrows coated with an unknown green liquid which Thomas assumed was poisonous. The 5 vampires quickly stepped in. Although they're much faster than humans, they're just lowly vampires, so 4 managed to step aside in time, but the last one was unlucky. 3 arrows hit him in his head, shoulder and knee. Looking at his situation, the vampires have a grim expression. It should be fine now. Enter. Thomas coldly commanded them after seeing their fear of entering. One thing he hates the most is cowardice, despite being a coward himself. Gulping their saliva, the vampires entered cautiously while looking everywhere in fear. even watching their own steps. Like little children. Thomas resisted the urge to slap his forehead, but since they're useful kept it to himself. Much to their relief, there weren't traps anymore. Or at least from what they know. Once they got in, they were surprised to see a maze. So that's why there weren't any more traps. Thomas squinted his eyes and muttered in realization. Go, and search for the real entrance. Thomas commanded. He just tried his X-ray and discovered that it is useless here. The vampires nodded their heads and separated to search for the real entrance. It didn't take long before they found it, thanks to their number. However, the entrance instead is a very small trapdoor. 50 of you, stay here. Who knows, that arrow trap might have alerted someone inside. Thomas said before climbing the trapdoor and entered cautiously and sneakily. Once inside, he quickly opened the trapdoor wide so others could enter. All right, search for the target and inform me. Thomas mentally gave them the order before going on his separate way. 10 minutes of searching, Thomas could already hear the gunshots and bombs occurring outside. This prompted him to go faster in searching, but to no avail. There wasn't any sign of her. Fuck. In anger, Thomas kicked a door open and stunned the occupant inside. Seeing who did, he disturbed and hoped that it's not Dracula. His eyes widened in surprise at seeing a familiar white-haired ice queen. Elsa. Thinking of this, Thomas finally got a plan B in his mind. Since they couldn't find Mavis, then Elsa will do. Chapter 160, ch 154, the third wave of invasion final. What are you doing in my room and who are you? Elsa stood up from her bed and asked with a threatening tone. Everyone in the castle knows who she is and regarded her as the wife of their hero, so her treatment is different from the other tenants of the hotel. She's more like royalty here. Although Dracula offered for some witches to guard her room, she rejected it along with Jinn, since they're afraid that their nightly activities would leak out to the witches. There are rumors that witches are known for their gossiping mouths. So if they had a night activity with the witches guarding their room, the next day everyone would know about their activities as quickly as the news outlet. This is the same reason why Thomas could enter and scout the entire floor without any problems, because of this. You must be Elsa, right? Smirking to himself, Thomas asked with confidence, and seeing the shocked look on Elsa's face, just confirmed his suspicions. So this is somehow a multiverse traveler. Tisk, I'm jealous. Thomas gritted his teeth in jealousy before looking at Elsa with lust in his eyes. Well, your boyfriend isn't here, so how about you come with me? At the same time, Thomas has already mentally called his comrades to come to his position, so it didn't take long before several vampires with glowing red eyes had flooded the room. This must be some kind of kidnapping situation. As a princess, she has heard and read stories of enemy kingdoms kidnapping the princesses of their opponents' kingdoms and making them a hostage, or much worse, doing vile things with them. Seeing that she's in the same situation, Elsa didn't hesitate to release her ice powers in front of her, freezing several vampires. However, Thomas has already predicted this since he knew who Elsa was. Though he's still surprised that her ice powers were so fast that if he didn't react in time, his entire arm would have been in a frostbite. Quickly, incapacitate her. Thomas immediately ordered, and the vampires all flashed from their positions and arrived at each side of Elsa. Get away from me. Closing her eyes and feeling the icy blast threatening to come out, Elsa let go of all her constraints and released her terrifying ice powers. Fwoosh. It didn't take long for the entire room to freeze from her powers while the lucky vampires all got out of the room at the same time. She's a hard opponent, I'll distract her while you knock her unconscious. Thomas gritted his teeth. With how loud this battle is going, it won't take long before reinforcements come and they would be surrounded by all kinds of monsters, much worse by Dracula himself. Using his mind powers, Thomas's eyes glowed and he quickly disabled Elsa's movements through it while the vampires all arrived behind her and raised their hands to knock her unconscious. Unable to feel her limbs, Elsa could only watch as the vampires knock her unconscious. Just before her vision darkens, there was one last thought in her mind. Jinn, help me. A few minutes earlier, outside the castle, there was a siege going on. Thankfully, the traps that they accidentally activated on the cemetery and many more have alerted every monster in the castle, so they were prepared for any invasion. And thanks to it, they managed to hold the siege back down instead of being surprised. Murray, keep those sands coming. Dracula ordered while standing on top of the wall. I'm doing my best. Back on the ground, Murray was using his sand powers to constantly release sand and refill the broken pieces on the wall. So in the human eyes, they were seeing the wall being broken down by their bombs and artillery only for it to regenerate back as if nothing happened. This can't go on any longer. Whoever or whatever is doing this must have its limits. The general outside has already set up his war tent where he and his closest advisors would discuss plans and such. They have already sent their location to the choppers. So instead of going in blindly, the choppers now have the exact location of the castle. So they would just have to fly high in the sky to reach their destination. Hearing the general's order, the person in charge of the artillery nodded his head and continued firing at the wall non-stop. I don't think I can hold much longer. Murray sweats heavily as he keeps pumping his powers to its maximum, producing tons upon tons of sand out of his own body. Luckily for him, the long-awaited reinforcement finally arrived. The witches have finally arrived after preparing their tools to aid them in the war. Hi-hi-hi-hi. Feeling the rush of adrenaline in their bloods, the witches felt like they were back in their previous eras. An era where they used to terrorize human villages and towns, spreading their terror across the continent. The witches have arrived. Prepare the homing missiles. The general, looking through his binoculars, has long seen the arrival of the witches, and per each report that he read by the Bravo 69 unit, they have prepared necessary measures for them. Taking out the bazookas equipped with homing systems, the soldiers aimed their weapons at the unsuspecting witches. Aiming, locked on, fire. The person leading the bazooka firing squad, aimed his bazooka along with the others, and once they got a lock on each witch, he finally shouted the magical word. Boom! Fwoosie! The smoke on the backs of their weapons flamed as the homing missiles shot out of its home. Back to the witches, they immediately noticed the flying missiles on their way, remembering what Jin told them about the humans' weapons, and one of them is a flying bomb called a missile. All the witches manipulated the broomsticks to avoid the missiles and kept going on their own way. However, what they failed to notice was that the missiles all quickly changed directions and made a U-turn in the air before eventually hitting one of the closest witches. Boom! Before anyone could react, the poor witch exploded in mid-air much to their shocks, and before they could recover, another poor witch was caught by the missile and also exploded. That's when they finally woke up from their trance and recovered. They immediately took out their protection totems and destroyed it with their bare hands before a familiar transparent hue surrounded them like a shield before the missiles came in contact with their shields. Boom! The smokes of the missiles covered the entire sky and under everyone, including the monsters' deep breaths. The heavy smoke slowly cleared and under their eyes laid upon the witches, who were all unharmed except for the cracked shields in front of them. Yes! Seeing the witches resisting one of human's strongest weapons, it was Vlad who jumped and cheered from the ground. Not expecting this behavior from him, Dracula shook his head, thinking that his father never changed. Before his eyes darted around and seeing no one looking in their direction, he flapped his cape and made a victory jump. Yahoo! As a monster considered as the father of monsters, Dracula felt proud of the witches who have all been working under him for hundreds of years ever since the hotel was built. Although they're just his workers whose job is to clean dirty bathrooms and make sure the hotel is 100% free of germs, Dracula has long already considered them as acquaintances. Meanwhile, the humans were all shocked that the missiles were blocked by that strange blue transparent hue that surrounded the witches. So that is the purpose of it. I've read it on the reports, and this is the only time I discovered its purpose. And seeing the cracks on it means that the shield is not indestructible. With enough explosions, those shields would destroy along with these walls. Just as the general was about to have his victory pose as if he unearthed a very heavy secret that will lead to their victory, would the witches stay idle after their shields have cracks on it? Obviously not. They quickly took out their glaring in red pumpkins before throwing them towards the soldiers. Especially towards the squad where the artillery is besieging the walls. Boom! 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 Several explosions occurred at the battlefield. At the same time, Tigress finally showed herself and jumped inside the battlefield while Rapunzel stayed behind and used her powers on Murray, who was sighing in relief after feeling his strength coming back to him. Until now, Rapunzel's powers are still a miracle. If she were to be a character in some competitive video games, she would definitely be banned or nerfed several times, showing just how broken her ability is. Meanwhile, Tigress was having the fun of her life. The thrill of dodging the bullets while shielding a few of them with her fur was a very exhilarating experience. The pain, the joy, and the never-ending excitement is giving her the strength that she never expected. And so, her figure has descended on the battlefield and wreaked havoc amongst the humans. Meanwhile, as soon as Elsa was tied on ropes and they were about to return to the trapdoor, they were suddenly interrupted by someone. Someone that looks familiar to Thomas, someone who should have died in the movie. Why, you You're Martha. Thomas was shocked and he couldn't hide his shivering hands as he pointed his finger at her. There's no way the dead could be brought back to life, right? It seems like you know me. This will make things easier then. Drop Elsa down gently, or do I have to do it myself? Martha tilted her head and softly said, however the aura she's emanating and the glowing eyes of hers says otherwise.
Thanks for listening.